Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic. Following a weeks-long pursuit, a second tanker was seized in the Caribbean. President Trump says the U.S. will receive up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil, plus why Nicolas Maduro's capture is raising questions about Chinese-made air defense systems. The federal government is moving to claw back millions in taxpayer dollars from what it calls widespread Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. One official says it's just the tip of the iceberg. The younger son of Hollywood filmmaker Rob Reiner is due in court today, facing murder charges in the stabbing deaths of his parents, and if convicted, he could face the death penalty. Warner Bros. Discovery has rejected Paramount's latest takeover bid. The media giant tells shareholders to stick with a competing offer from Netflix.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Alice Tang. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic Ocean. The Justice Department announced the seizure of the Bella 1 for violations of U.S. sanctions. The move follows a weeks-long pursuit starting near Venezuela last month. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed the news on X, writing, quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect everywhere, anywhere in the world." The vessel was previously known as Bella 1 and has been renamed the Marinera, and it's one of U.S. sanctioned lists for evading oil restrictions tied to Venezuela. The Department of Homeland Security led the operation with military support. U.S. law enforcement officials are now aboard the ship. There were no reports of shots fired during the boarding. The seizure comes after the tanker was tracked near Scotland, drawing criticism from Moscow, which says the vessel was operating in international waters under Russian law. The U.S. has also seized 2 other sanctioned tankers near Venezuela in recent weeks as part of its blockade of illicit oil shipments. And in a separate operation, the U.S. Southern Command said it captured a second Venezuela-linked tanker in the Caribbean Sea. And in a social media post, Southern Command said the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The vessel is known as Sophia. The Southern Command said it was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting a ship to U.S. And more developments from Venezuela. President Trump announced yesterday the U.S. will soon receive up to 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil in the near future. We have NTD's Daniel Monahan with more on that, plus a look at how Chinese defense systems in Venezuela failed to impress.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the oil the U.S. receives from Venezuela will be sold at market price and that money will be controlled by him as President of the United States. Trump says he will ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The transfer could be worth nearly $3 billion, with oil trading at roughly $56 a barrel. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum discusses utilizing oil from Venezuela, speaking on Fox News.
You need to dilute that heavy crude with a lighter product. And of course, we have an excess of that lighter product here because the shale oils that come out of the shale revolution in America are perfect for blending. It's great news for jobs. It's great news for gas prices going forward. It's great news for America, and it's great news for Venezuela.
Burgum says Venezuela has an opportunity now to have capital come in and rebuild their economy.
They have large oil reserves in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world. Venezuela, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, pushed back on UN criticism of the Maduro operation, speaking on Fox News.
I don't know why they're so upset. As I pointed out at the Security Council, over 50 countries didn't even recognize Maduro because he stole the election. So it's hard to figure out what they're so upset about. Well, I think we know the answer. It's because it's President Trump, and he's a man of action and took real action.
Waltz says the Venezuelan people are going to be better off.
And look, at the end of the day, this was the right thing to do. President Trump took bold action and will continue to swing and doge that ridiculous organization called the United Nations.
The lightning operation to capture Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, punched in and out of Caracas before its air defenses could mount an effective response. The raid raised uncomfortable questions for China about the limits of the Chinese-supplied systems that Venezuela has leaned on, especially anti-stealth radar that China advertised as capable of spotting and stopping U.S. stealth aircraft. Analyst Yu Tsung-chi, a retired major general from Taiwan, says the operation suggested deeper weaknesses, corruption in China's defense industry, and a lack of reliability of the technology and command structure meant to tie those systems together. Yu described it as a system built to look modern on paper and intimidating in propaganda, but falls apart under the demands of real combat. Yu says neither Chinese or Russian air defense systems made the slightest bit of difference once the U.S. brought real-time intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision weapons to bear. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And sticking with Venezuela, what it's like to survive in Maduro's Venezuela as a candidate for the opposition party. A Venezuelan man who fled the U.S. confronted the former socialist leader during his arraignment in New York City. That's after suffering political persecution in his home country. Our sister media, the Economic Times, was at the scene when he spoke to reporters. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Pablo Escobar was trained to be one day the president and then control all the areas. That dream became true in Venezuela.
An anti-Maduro activist in New York City, comparing former socialist leader Nicolas Maduro to late drug lord Pablo Escobar. He says Maduro is a drug lord as well, but one who managed to take over an entire country. Pedro Rojas, a self-described political prisoner in Venezuela, yelled at Maduro during the arraignment on Monday.
Maduro looks straight at me. I have no fear. I speak for 40 million Venezuelans who are happy today because Maduro was arrested.
Rojas told Maduro that he's not an innocent man, as he claims, and that Maduro is guilty of all the charges brought by the U.S. Justice Department. Maduro and his wife are charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, drug trafficking, and weapons charges. They pled not guilty to all charges. Rojas was asked what kind of consequences he wants to see against Maduro.
That the full force of the law will be applied. Today, Venezuela has political prisoners who have been sentenced to 20 years, to 18 years, to 14 years. Mothers in Venezuela have been arrested because of this bloodthirsty man.
Rojas says he was jailed for almost half a year in 2019 for allegedly attempting to harm Maduro. That's after he tried to run for Congress for an opposition party in 2015. The man translating for Rojas says running for the opposition in Maduro's Venezuela had two possible outcomes: to die or to end up in prison. Rojas sent the following message to President Trump regarding the future of Venezuela.
Us Venezuelans are willing to return to our national territory immediately, to rebuild the country and to work with North America, to make America great and make it so that Venezuela can become an exceptional country.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado also says she wants to return to Venezuela. According to Machado, she spent 16 months in hiding before escaping Venezuela last month to receive her Nobel Peace Prize, which she dedicated to President Trump. Florida Senator Rick Scott says he spoke with Machado on Tuesday.
The first thing she said is she's so appreciative that President Trump took the action he did to give the children and the families of Venezuela the opportunity for freedom. Number one, she said we've got to make sure that the political prisoners in Venezuela, including Americans, are immediately released.
According to the senator, Machado also wants to fight the repression taking place in Venezuela. The remaining members of the Maduro regime recently ordered police to arrest anyone supporting the U.S. military operation in the country. According to Machado, people are being silenced and 14 journalists were detained within just 24 hours. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The State Department has expanded its list of nations whose citizens will be subject to visa bonds of up to $15,000 to enter the United States. It has added 25 more nations, and the latest additions will bring the total up to 38. The newly added countries include Algeria, Cuba, Nepal, Nigeria, Venezuela, and others. B1, B2 visas are used for short-term tourism and business travel. Citizens of those nations who are eligible are required to post a bond ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, with the amounts being determined during the visa interview. The list of nations stem from a 12-month visa bond pilot program the department launched in August last year. It targeted countries with high visa overstay rates, insufficient screening and vetting, or those that offer citizenship to individuals via investment. The younger son of slain Hollywood filmmaker Rob Reiner is due in court today. He is set to enter a plea on murder charges in one of the most shocking celebrity homicide cases in Los Angeles history. Nick Reiner is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the fatal stabbing of his parents, Rob Reiner and photographer-producer Michelle Reiner, his wife. Both bodies were found in December 14th inside their West Los Angeles home. Prosecutors say the killings occurred earlier that morning. Reiner is expected to plead not guilty. His initial court appearance last month was delayed at the request of the defense party. Authorities have released new details about the case, saying both victims died from multiple sharp force injuries. And if convicted, Nick Reiner faces life in prison without parole or the death penalty. Warner Brothers Discovery has rejected Paramount's latest takeover bid. The media giant told shareholders to stick with a competing offer from Netflix. Warner Brothers leadership has repeatedly rebuffed Paramount's bid. The company has urged shareholders to back the sale of its streaming and studio business to Netflix for $72 billion. Warner Brothers Discovery said today that its board determined Paramount's offer is not in the best interest of the company or its shareholders. Paramount has offered $77.79 billion for the entire company and has gone straight to shareholders with a hostile bid. Last month, Paramount added a guarantee from Oracle founder Larry Ellison to back $40.4 billion in equity financing for the company's offer. Larry Ellison is the father of Paramount CEO David Ellison. Paramount also increased its promised payout to shareholders to $5.8 billion if the deal is blocked by regulators. The White House will be making a new MAHA announcement at the press conference at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. In a post to X this morning, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said she will be joined by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as well as Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. We will be live streaming that press conference when it starts. Stay tuned. And House Oversight Committee is now questioning Minnesota state lawmakers about the state's alleged misuse of federal funds. Let's tune into the hearing.
The majority is not going after the real fraud that's being committed to the American public. Now, in Illinois, he has threatened funding for more than 62,000 kids. 62,000 kids. And finally, in Colorado, the other state that he's going after, more than 16,000 kids will lose funding. But we know, of course, that the president will let his friends get away with crime. And I want to point out one last thing, which is so important. While Donald Trump attacks these states, the Wall Street Journal on Monday reported a massive Mississippi scandal. Mississippi, of course, isn't on Trump's list. We don't have witnesses from Mississippi here today. Oversight Republicans aren't calling in Governor Tate. And I think the question is, why? We have real fraud happening, yet there's zero interest, apparently, in what's happening here in Mississippi and other places. Republicans want to cut benefits and attack states with Democratic governors. And what it's done, particularly in places like Minnesota, it has unleashed bigotry and hate. Minnesota child care centers have become the target of harassment and even vandalism and theft. Parents are afraid to drop their kids off in the morning and go to work. This is an opportunity, again, to attack for the House majority and smear innocent people without evidence. If we cared about fraud, we'd be starting at the very top. This is critical for the country and to actually take on fraud and abuse and the fraudsters that are being pardoned across the United States. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I would like to now welcome our witnesses here today. First, we have Kristen Robbins, Chairwoman of the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee and representative for District 37A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. Welcome. Next, we have Walter Hudson, a member of the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee and representative for Minnesota's District 30A. Next, we have Marion Rarick, a member of Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee and representative for District 29B in Minnesota. Lastly, we have Brendan Ballou, a former special counsel at the Department of Justice. So thank you all for joining us, and we look very forward to your testimony today. This is an issue the American people are very interested in. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you all, and you may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements, and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Representative Robbins for her opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you for inviting us to testify. As chair of the Fraud Prevention Committee in Minnesota, I've been working to uncover the massive fraud under Tim Walz, propose solutions, and hold state agencies accountable. Today, I will highlight the scale of the problem, outline the work our committee is doing to fight the fraud, and provide a roadmap for other states on how to detect and stop fraud. Minnesota is one of the highest tax states in the nation, and hardworking Minnesotans have been told that they don't pay their fair share for years. In truth, Minnesotans pay much more in taxes than in other states, and when they pay their taxes, they expect that their money is going to things that help our communities: roads, schools, healthcare, and law enforcement. They do not want their tax dollars absconded by criminals to buy resorts and apartment buildings in Kenya, property in Turkey, and luxury homes and cars in the U.S. Tim Walz and his administration have willfully turned a blind eye to crime in the face of countless whistleblower and auditor reports, as well as stories by local investigative journalists and the Center of the American Experiment. These are actual crimes that must be punished. They are crimes against our moral values and erode trust in government. The time for accountability and justice is here. First, we are unearthing staggering amounts of fraud in Minnesota. As far back as 2014, there were credible whistleblower allegations of millions in daycare fraud. Instead of shutting it down, the state minimized whistleblower reports and allowed fraud to grow. Unfortunately, childcare fraud was just the tip of the iceberg. Since 2019, Tim Walz and Minnesota Democrats have allowed fraud to absolutely explode in Minnesota. There's been more than $300 million in the Feeding Our Future child nutrition program scandal, and the Feeding Our Future prosecutions revealed that as many as half of those indicted also ran other Medicaid-funded programs. Yet despite this being known back in 2023, Tim Walz and his agencies have done nothing to stop those defendants from getting additional state money. We have now found fraud in multiple Medicaid programs, including autism centers, sober homes, non-emergency medical transportation, integrated community supports, and housing stabilization. Just last month, our committee held a hearing on credible allegations of fraud in 2 new areas: adult day services and assisted living. First, U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, the leading prosecutor in these cases from the Biden administration and the Trump administration, says the fraud could be an astronomical $9 billion. In the face of mounting reports and literal criminal indictments and convictions, the Walz administration has repeatedly and publicly denied or downplayed the fraud. Just last January, the commissioner of DHS, Jody Harpstead, who'd been on the job for 5.5 years, said, "There's a lot more rumors of fraud than there is actual fraud." You cannot make this up. The Walz administration has been gaslighting Minnesotans on the scale of the fraud problem for years. In response, when Republicans took control or ended Democrat control of the Minnesota House last year, we created the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee. Since last February, we have held 15 hearings where we have grilled officials, exposed new areas of fraud, and repeatedly flagged failures in internal controls. I authored a new law to expand whistleblower protection, and we created a portal, mnfraud.com, resulting in a surge of new whistleblower reports that our amazing staff is still working through. Under the leadership of our Vice Chair, Patty Anderson, we passed a bipartisan bill in the Senate to create an independent Office of Inspector General. When it got to the House, Democrats killed it because the DHS commissioner testified against it. The Tim Walz administration has utterly failed to protect Minnesota taxpayers and vulnerable citizens, ignoring years of credible reports and retaliating against those who spoke up, often by claiming they were racist or Islamophobic. Tim Walz and the Democrats have repeatedly protected their political base at the expense of all Minnesotans. Other states should learn from the failures of the Walz administration, so I'll give you a quick roadmap on how to find and stop fraud. First, culture matters. Fraud flourishes when leaders ignore it and criminals see they can get away with it. Second, fraud flourishes when basic internal controls are not followed. This is not complicated. Third, you have to look at the interconnections of relationships in businesses in multiple program areas in Medicaid. It's a huge red flag that has been ignored in our state. Finally, it is important to say what is true and to stand up against fake allegations of racism or Islamophobia. Crime is crime, no matter who is committing it. It is true that the majority of the fraud in Minnesota has taken place in the Somali community. And it is also true that some of our best whistleblowers are from the Somali community. Democrats refuse to acknowledge this truth, and that has enabled criminals to steal billions and hurt our vulnerable citizens. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to share the lessons from Minnesota and for your help in investigating these crimes. The time for justice and accountability is now.
I now recognize Representative Hudson for his opening statement.
Chairman, ranking member, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today for the record. I am Minnesota State Representative Walter Hudson, a second-term member who sits on our House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee. The recent national conversation about fraud in Minnesota has been fraught with distractions, diverting from critical concerns regarding process, policy, and oversight to sideshow concerns about personalities and partisan politics. My role here today is to cut through all of that and provide you with a clear picture of a culture which has developed over many years around the several generous benefit programs which Minnesota provides to our residents. Well-documented oversight failures have led to a lack of program integrity, creating incentives for people to monetize programs beyond their legislative intent to turn benefits into business. Contrary to the claim just made by the ranking member that there is no evidence of this fraud, attached to my written testimony, you will find a document which collates several reports made over the past 15 years by Minnesota's nonpartisan Office of Legislative Auditor, along with transcripts of each of our hearings from the Fraud Committee, where we heard directly from staff and leaders within the state agencies which administer these programs. Here's what that record indicates. Within the state of Minnesota, government oversight has been unable to keep up with program expansion due to a combination of factors. One, rapid expansion of funding and provider participation. Two, payment systems that prioritize access and speed. Three, verification mechanisms that occur after funds are distributed. Four, oversight capacity that does not scale with spending. And five, diffuse accountability across agencies and contractors. This combination of factors has fostered a booming new sector of the economy that relies upon the continuation of and expansion of government programs to fuel private sector profits. I want to be clear, even when the law is being followed precisely by every jot and tittle, incentives still exist to abuse these programs and waste taxpayer dollars by diverting funding to profit centers rather than providing a safety net for those in temporary need. Now, criminal fraud is rampant. Deputy U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, serving the District of Minnesota, has said that he could keep 1,000 prosecutors busy. But he's limited to a mere 25, only 5 of which are tasked with building fraud cases. He estimates that the total amount of criminal fraud over 5 years may reach $9 billion, which is fully 1/2 of the money that has been directed to these programs by the state. While Governor Tim Walz and other stakeholders dispute that assessment, the point I wish to emphasize is this. Whatever the actual number is, the full scope of the problem is not just criminal fraud, but a culture of profiting from government programs in perpetuity, not as a safety net, but as an industry. I have personally met and had discussions with folks who identify themselves as consultants for multiple entities accepting government benefits. They have made a career out of showing people how to leverage the gaps in government oversight to maximize benefit payments. Now, such conduct may not actually break the law, and that's the point. We have a system whereby an entire industry can operate under the color of law, raking in tremendous profits for individuals, all while having no incentive to save the taxpayer money or lift legitimate beneficiaries out of need. Instead, as the market for funneling benefits into businesses increases, so too does the perceived need for benevolent services. If nothing changes, if oversight is not tightened, if incentives are not changed, spending on these programs will only continue to increase with no commensurate increase in either public good or public confidence in our governing institutions. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this testimony for the record. I look forward to answering what questions I can.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Rarick for her opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. For the record, my name is Marion Rarick, and I am currently serving in the Minnesota House of Representatives in House District 29B. I am a member on the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, which was recently formed in January of 25. I was first asked to serve on the committee on January 4th, and soon after, the 5 Republican members began to meet. During one of those discussions, I was asked to reach out to the Department of Human Services whistleblowers on X, now called Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting Commentary. I had been following them in the previous year. I reached out through a direct tweet on X on January 16th, and the very same day I got a response back that yes, they would be willing to speak to the Fraud Prevention Committee. Since that first contact, Chair Robbins and I and Representative Hudson have had multiple conference calls with them, and we have had one in-person meeting. At that meeting, they were both former and current employees. I've continued to message with them very often, sometimes daily, and their collective message has been completely consistent. Instead of focusing on fraudsters, DHS leadership instead focused its surveillance on employees. Since then, their expressed fear of retaliation has intensified under an avalanche of fraud in Minnesota. Their numbers have grown from 480 DHS employees, both current and former, to over 1,000 across multiple state agencies. They have told me repeatedly how grateful they are to the House Fraud Prevention Committee for focusing our attention on fraud in the state programs, using their inside information while keeping them completely protected. They have explained that they live in a constant state of fear of retaliation. One only has to look at what happened to Faye Bernstein to understand why. In a very recent Newsweek article dated December 13th of 25, Ms. Bernstein, a former compliance specialist, stated, Minnesota DHS functions in the opposite manner as you would think. Employees who suggest improvements or, heaven forbid, report fraud then face significant retaliation. The messenger is shot. In 2019, Bernstein said she alerted Minnesota DHS officials to sloppy contracting practices that were not legally compliant. But it's not what most people would even consider fraud. She says she was later escorted out of the building, faced lengthy investigation, got trespassed from all DHS owned and leased properties, and received involuntary transfer to another state agency. So she says, so today if someone asks me, should I report fraud within DHS, I say no, no, no. It is career suicide plus a whole lot more. So let's talk about that plus a whole lot more. In our face-to-face meetings with a group of whistleblowers, they revealed that retaliation now includes threats of being fired with cause, which means you do not get unemployment insurance in the state of Minnesota, being blacklisted from all state agencies, and I would note most likely our largest counties as well, which are Democrat-run. And then there was a veiled threat of the use of military intelligence against them. They later informed me that it was discovered that in some targeted employees or suspected whistleblowers' personnel files were pictures of their homes and their cars. They also described that supervisors asked them questions about their families that to them felt like a threat. One example was, we need to know where your kids go to school and where their bus stops are. I will also note that whistleblowers we spoke to described many times that DHS used surveillance programs to surveil employees' emails and chats and other communications, looking for keywords like fraud, double billing, underspending, and overpayments. One example that the whistleblowers let me know about Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. April 12th, 2024. Flanagan comes to a DHS Health and Human Services Equity Conference at the Heritage Center and Brooklyn Center. On stage, Flanagan acknowledges the X account and the fraud concerns it raised and publicly denounced the X users and called them weirdos and losers sitting in their mother's basement. This was in a public setting with hundreds of participants and elicited gasps among the crowd. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Ballou for his opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Brennan Ballou. I'm a former federal prosecutor and a native Minnesotan. Like all Minnesotans, like all Americans who have heard this story, I am deeply distressed by the fraud on the state's social service programs. Most notably, in 2022, the Department of Justice indicted 47 people for stealing an estimated $246 million in funds meant to feed children during the COVID-19 pandemic. As late as 2025, 78 people have been indicted as part of the scheme and 56 have pleaded guilty. More recently, the department has charged over a dozen people for stealing $14 million from a program meant for children with autism and millions more from a program meant to help disabled Minnesotans maintain stable housing. This is heartbreaking for several reasons. At the most basic level, money meant for the neediest among us, the hungry, the disabled, the destitute, was stolen. I fear that skepticism of Minnesota's social safety net, one of the things that makes the state great, will grow, and it will be harder to fund these programs in the future. And I fear that the actions of a few people will be used to demonize an entire population of Somali and East African Minnesotans who overwhelmingly have made the state more vibrant, more diverse, and more prosperous. I also fear the selective interest in fraud in America, because at the same time that these crimes are rightly being investigated by state and federal authorities, the larger infrastructure for prosecuting fraud and white-collar crime is being dismantled. Let me give you a few examples. In February 2025, the Department of Justice paused enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits foreign bribery and criminal violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which, as the name suggests, prohibits acting as a secret agent of a foreign power. Between February and April of last year, the department disbanded its Klepto Capture Task Force, which enforced sanctions against Russian oligarchs, and the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. And last year, the department forced out most of the lawyers of the Public Integrity Section, which prosecutes crimes by government officials, announced plans to dismantle the Tax Division, which prosecutes tax evasion, and shuttered the FBI task force that investigated congressional misconduct. More than just dismantling infrastructure for pursuing violations of the law, the government is, for favored defendants, appearing to enable it. In 2024, the Justice Department indicted Andrew Wiederhorn, the CEO of a casual fast food chain, for allegedly stealing $47 million from his own company. After his business donated $100,000 to the Trump inaugural committee, his case was dropped, and the line-level prosecutor on his case was fired. In 2021, the department sued Boeing for deceiving the government about the software that caused 2 plane crashes, killing 346 people. After donating $1 million to the inaugural committee, Boeing negotiated a favorable deferred prosecution agreement that the judge overseeing the case said, quote, fails to secure the necessary accountability to ensure the safety of the flying public. But he felt compelled by precedent to accept it nevertheless. The examples continue. Banks that contributed to the inaugural committee had litigations against them for violating consumer financial protection laws dropped, and so too did cryptocurrency companies that were investigated and sued by the Securities and Exchange Commission and who contributed to the inaugural committee. Crucially, those crypto companies that did not donate to the committee or other affiliated entities remain defendants of the government. The scale of these frauds involve millions stolen and hundreds killed, and yet they have received a fraction of the attention of the fraud that happened in Minnesota. This concerns me because we are both dismantling our infrastructure for fighting fraud and providing a roadmap for how those fraudsters who are prosecuted can buy their way out of justice. While we need to pursue the fraud we're seeing in Minnesota's social safety programs for all the reasons I said, because it is the weakest among us who are being harmed, we cannot selectively show an interest in fraud. If we do, we put some people, the very powerful and the very rich, beyond the reach of the law. Thank you.
Thank you all for your opening statements. We'll now begin the questioning portion of the hearing, and our chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas for the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing so expeditiously. We all know this is an important issue, not just in terms of welfare fraud, but also immigration more broadly. So we appreciate it, and thank you for the witnesses for taking the time to come here. I want to start with you, Mr. Baloo. Again, thank you for being here. Let me ask you, does large-scale Somali immigration make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
Certainly stronger.
Certainly stronger. Do you know what percentage of Somali-headed households in Minnesota are on food stamps?
No.
54%. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Well, to be clear, a majority of the...
It's 7%. There's a big difference between 54% and 7%, is there not?
Excuse me, sir, could I answer the question?
Let me move on. We've got a lot of questions here. What percentage of Somali-headed households in Minnesota are on Medicaid?
I don't know.
It's 73%. Do you know what that number is for Minnesota native households?
Again, you're using the phrase Minnesota native households, but the majority...
The number is 18%. That's quite an astounding difference. I think we would agree.
Can I answer the question, please?
Let me ask you one more, and then we can go on to that. What percentage of Somali-headed households are on welfare in general?
I don't know.
It's 81%. What about, let me just ask you, after 10 years of being in the United States, what percentage of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare?
I don't know.
The number is 78%. So even after 10 years, 78% of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Again, you're using
non-Somali immigrant-headed households.
If I can just answer the question, when you're using the phrase native Minnesotans, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are as Minnesotan as any of us. They were born in the United States. It's only 8,000 of the 108,000 Somalis.
And nevertheless, the welfare usage is astoundingly different. Let me ask you again, does that make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
Again, I'd like the opportunity to answer the question here.
Go for it.
Again, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are born in the United States, as I understand it.
Okay, well, what percentage of working-age Somalians who have been in the U.S. for 10 years or more, how many of them speak English very well?
I don't know.
About half. The answer is about half. That seems pretty low, doesn't it?
Again, I keep trying to...
It doesn't sound like something that makes our country stronger to me, and I think most Americans would agree with me on that. I need to move on. Ms. Robbins, when would you say we concretely knew that widespread welfare fraud was occurring in Minnesota?
There have been reports since 2009 from the Office of Legislative Auditor. I would say the credible reports on childcare fraud started surfacing 2011 to 2013.
So for over a decade.
Yes, sir.
When do you think Governor Walz knew about this fraud?
From the very beginning. He was running for governor in 2018 when there were prosecutions going on, when there was an OLA report, active cases in the news all the time.
And what was the Walz administration's response?
They actually did nothing when they got into office, and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan had been on the committee in the legislature that had hearings on child care fraud, and when they got into office, they did put $5 million into a little more money, but nothing changed.
But nothing. And let me ask you, Mr. Hudson, thank you for being here. Did those who commit this fraud, do they typically vote for Republicans or Democrats, in your opinion?
In my opinion, thank you for qualifying it like that, I would say they most definitely overwhelmingly vote for Democrats.
Do they typically donate to Republicans or Democrats?
Not to my knowledge. They don't donate to Republicans, they donate to Democrats, in my opinion, yes.
Got it. So would you say this is the Somali population is an important demographic for Democrats to win over politically?
Unquestionably.
Got it. And do you think it would have hurt Democrats' political standing with the Somali population to investigate this fraud?
Very clearly.
Got it. So in other words, you're saying that there was a political incentive to cover up widespread Somali fraud. Is that right? Three of you. Did the Walz administration this fraud while it was happening?
That and the commissioner met with a group called the Minnesota Minority Child Care Association multiple times, and that they were trying to weaken protections. We wanted, we had several changes we wanted to do, and they opposed all of them.
And Mr. Hudson and Ms. Rarick, and then my time is up.
I would agree.
Absolutely. The whistleblowers confirm it.
Got it. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Ranking Member Garcia.
Thank you. I just want to clarify one thing. I just want to just be very clear that a vast majority of those Somali Minnesotans are United States citizens, and Somali Americans have as much right to access those services, or any Somalis, as United States members of Congress. They have the same right to access services, and we're talking about U.S. citizens. Marks that I had said that no fraud exists, and I think you can feel free to run the tape. That's not exactly not what I said. What I have been talking about, what's important for us to remember, is that wherever fraud exists, we should take it on, and we should hold folks accountable. And when people commit fraud and people get hurt, there's going to be repercussions, as there should be. We can all agree to that. We want to hold fraudsters accountable. We want to protect the victims and innocent people, so those that can access services can continue to access services across this country. That's how it should work. But we also know that's not how it should work according to President Trump. Now, let's actually talk about real fraud and some fraudsters. Now, we all know that recently, here in Florida, President Trump granted a get-out-of-jail-free pardon to Philip S. Forms. Now, Mr. S. Forms is a nursing home mogul convicted of schemes to defraud Medicare and Medicaid of $1.3 billion. Where is that hearing? This guy just didn't steal from taxpayers. He took advantage of thousands of people, admitting them to nursing homes and living facilities that could not help them. His network of doctors gave out dangerous and harmful treatments and prescribing opioids to drug addicts just to make more money. In 2019, when S. Forms was sentenced, Trump's own DOJ issued a press release that quoted that the man behind one of the biggest healthcare frauds in history will be spending 20 years in prison. 20 years in prison, the DOJ said. Just 14 months later, Donald Trump let him walk free with a pardon. In October of this year, on his 56th birthday, S. Forms was arrested on domestic violence charges. Let's look at another case, another Trump case. Joseph Schwartz. He was sentenced for taking advantage of nursing home residents and workers and defrauding the government of $38 million. Where is that hearing? Schwartz paid lobbyists almost $1 million to secure a pardon from the president, and it worked. In November of this last year, a full and unconditional pardon was granted by President Trump for this enormous amount of fraud. Now let's look at Paul Walczak. a tax cheat whose crimes cost taxpayers almost $1.1 billion, dwarfing what we're talking about today, as he made lavish purchases like a $1 million luxury yacht. Now, Mr. Walczak was supposed to spend 18 months in prison, a fraudster who we want to go after. He should have been held accountable for his crimes. And he was supposed to pay $4.4 million back to the taxpayers. While this pardon application was pending, his mom was invited to a $1 million per person candlelight dinner at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. She attended, and less than 3 weeks later, her son received a full and unconditional pardon. Now, I'm assuming that our witnesses here today would think this is horrific fraud and would disagree with these pardons. I'd like to just, do you agree with this pardon? I'd like to begin with our witnesses.
Sir, I've not looked at the facts of the case or the law, so I cannot make a statement on that.
So you can't make a statement on these pardons. You haven't read anything about them in the news, apparently. These are pardons to criminals and fraudsters that our witnesses clearly have no interest in. Now, in Trump's America, rich people can rip innocent people off whenever they want and get a pardon. And the answer to fraud here is to cut off benefits to innocent people. Most of these folks are innocent people and kids who just need their services. Donald Trump's decision to freeze $10 billion in social services funding to 5 states does not hold criminals accountable. It hurts the very people who are harmed by fraud in the first place. Mr. Ballou, just finally, you are from Minnesota yourself. How are Minnesotans on the ground being hurt by Trump's political retribution crusade?
Well, the practical effect is that the pause on payments for child care services and Medicaid services are going to result in hundreds of thousands of the neediest Minnesotans being denied, in some cases, literally life-saving payments.
And also, as we've been discussing here, there is a large, of course, immigrant community, and a community that makes Minnesota stronger. Can you tell us how innocent people in the Somali community are being directly harmed?
Well, you hear about the threats that are happening against the Somali community. You're hearing about the broad demonization that's happening against them in the media generally. I think, I know we're running out of time here, but, if you look at the statistics, I believe it's 82 Somali Americans have been indicted so far. Out of 108,000 Somali Minnesotans in the state overall, that's something like a 0.07% criminal rate. When you compare that to 1/3 of all Americans have a criminal record, and I think it's 40% or approximately of white men under the age of 23 have been arrested. I don't think the statistics really compare.
Thank you, sir, and I yield back.
Without objection, House Majority Whip Emmer, Representatives Finstad, Fishback, and Stauber of Minnesota are waived on the committee for purpose of questioning the witnesses at today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair
I
now
seek
recognizes-
recognition to make 2 motions for subpoenas.
I was going to recognize the whip, but if you have a motion or state your...
I'd like to make a motion to subpoena Neville Singham, a U.S. billionaire with reported ties to the CCP that's been funding extremist organizations, fueling division and civil unrest in this country, especially regarding the ICE riots last summer, as well as I'd like to make a motion to subpoena the ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt for stifling free speech by listing the phrase America First as hate speech and Turning Point USA as a hate group.
Okay, motion has been made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of the committee hearing. The committee will now proceed with today's hearing.
On point of order, Mr. Chairman, will we get a written copy of that? Because that was a lot to go through.
Okay, yeah, we'll work with Representative Luna and get a copy.
Thank you.
All right. Chair now recognizes Majority Whip from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer.
Thank you, Chairman Comer, for holding this important hearing. As I said on Monday, good riddance to Governor Walz, but he cannot escape accountability for the estimated $9 billion in fraud. How did this happen? And where the hell has the Twin Cities media been? The Star Tribune is complicit. They have had this story for years, if you just heard, and they've refused to report anything on it. In fact, they continue to try and cover up. Our Minnesota Republican colleagues have demanded answers and accountability for years, but have seen nothing from Walz, his administration, our Democrat colleagues like Tina Smith, Amy Klobuchar, Ilhan Omar, and Angie Craig, or the worthless Star Tribune. Thank God for President Donald J. Trump for finally bringing attention to this issue. Representative Rarick, I'm going to begin with you. You've been working on this issue for years. You've spoken to the whistleblowers personally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have an understanding that 1,000 whistleblowers running an account on X have come forward to expose fraud in Minnesota state agencies, and they have been entirely ignored by Tim Walz and have even been retaliated against. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Even this morning, I got another message.
Well, in your experience, are their claims credible or are they politically motivated against Walz?
They are completely credible, not politically motivated.
In fact, many of these are Walz administration employees, correct?
They are actually Democrats as well.
Can you quickly give us one example of the retaliation these folks have been facing?
Yes, I can. In my opening statement, I mentioned that the most severe ones was that they would be fired with cause, so they couldn't have unemployment insurance, that they would be blacklisted from all state agencies, and I bet that it's also Hennepin County and Ramsey County, as you know, those are Democrat-run, and much, much more.
Based on what you've learned, Representative, over the last several years, do you have any doubt that Governor Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
He absolutely knew that it was occurring.
Thank you. The Housing Stability Services Program was estimated to cost about $2.6 million per year, but before it was shut down last October, it was on track to run about $122 million in 2025. In fact, I think they sucked $161 million out of it from the point it started in 2020 until it was finally shut down. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and Joe Thompson believes that 90% of that was fraud.
Yeah. The Quality Leering Center, as uncovered by Nick Shirley, received almost $10 million in funding. Is that accurate?
I believe it is.
There are more than 80 autism centers in Minnesota under investigation. Is that true?
I believe it is, yes.
It's clear that someone is criminally complicit. You can't just let this amount of money get out of your administration over a period of 7 years without knowing. There was a hearing in the state regarding the fraudulent housing stabilization program, but before that hearing, Governor Walz fired the official who was slated to testify so that they could not testify and expose what was happening under Governor Walz's watch. Has Governor Walz or Attorney General Ellison fired anyone else to your knowledge, Representative?
Not to my knowledge, and that was Eric Rumdahl, and his administration believes that he was not fired, but I say he was fired because it was too convenient.
Right. Representative Hudson, is it true that 90% of the individuals charged, regardless of what your colleague on the panel just said with his facts and figures, 90% of the individuals charged or indicted with the $250 million Feeding Our Future COVID fraud are of Somali descent?
I believe that to be correct.
Are you aware that in a 2021 video, Mr. Ellison promised that he would obstruct his own agencies in their investigation of Somali fraud?
I am very much aware of that.
It's no wonder that criminals in the Somali community felt they were free to steal taxpayer dollars. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Marion. Do you have any doubt that Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
None whatsoever.
Walz and Ellison were protecting fraudsters instead of investigating them, and it was purposeful. And it's no coincidence that this is occurring largely in the Somali community. Walz made a sanctuary state, Minnesota, a sanctuary state. He gave free health care, free college, and free licenses to illegals. And Walz looked the other way when Somali immigrants were stealing. Representative Robbins, do you have any doubt that Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
None whatsoever.
So all three of you have no doubt in your minds that Tim Walz knew about the $9 billion of fraud during his tenure as governor and did nothing about it. It looks like my time is about to expire, and I do want to say to all of you, on behalf of Minnesota, thank you for being here, and justice will be served. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Federal assistance programs are vital for keeping working families afloat and children healthy. Nearly 25% of adults and nearly 50% of children rely on federal assistance, including child care funding, Medicaid, and Children's Health Insurance Program, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Fraudsters targeting government programs have uniquely have a uniquely harmful impact on Americans. They deprive taxpayers of efficient use of their funds, deprive intended recipients and sometimes the most vulnerable groups in our society of the services and assistance they are eligible for, and they reduce the public trust in government. But answers to fraud is not to freeze critical assistance, critical safety net programs and cause more suffering for Americans who are already struggling to afford everyday expenses. I have worked with my colleagues on the Government Operations Subcommittee on ways that federal agencies can identify and prevent fraud before payments are made. My Oversight Committee Democrat colleagues and I are also proud co-sponsors of Congressional Men's Taxpayer Funds Oversight Accountability Act. This legislation would strengthen the ability of federal agencies to reliably track federal funds, enabling more efficient analysis to identify and stop fraudsters. We can continue to reduce fraud and protect funding.
That was live from Capitol Hill, where House Oversight Committee questioned 4 witnesses regarding their testimonies about Minnesota's alleged misuse of federal funds. Witnesses report government aid programs fuel private profits. One assessed the total gain from the fraud could rack up to $9 billion in total, and another confirmed the fraud is overlooked by the government for Governor Walz for his own political gain. That's all we have for this hour. If you have any feedback for the show or you have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'll cover more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
How covenant house changed my life.
Call or go online now and give just $19 a month. We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the difference you're making in a young person's life. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options. Only at selectspecs.com.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic following a weeks-long pursuit. A second tanker was seized in the Caribbean. President Trump says the U.S. will receive up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil. Plus, why Nicolas Maduro's capture is raising questions about Chinese-made air defense systems. The Somali ambassador to the UN, linked to a U.S. firm punished for Medicaid fraud. What are the ripple effects on taxpayers and the Somali community in the wake of the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota? We have a panel discussion.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Kevin Hogan. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic. The Justice Department announced the seizure of the Bella 1 for violations of U.S. sanctions. The move follows a weeks-long pursuit starting near Venezuela last month. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed the news on X, writing, quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world. The vessel was previously known as the Bella 1 and has been renamed the Marinera. It's on the U.S. sanctions list for evading oil restrictions tied to Venezuela." The Department of Homeland Security led the operation with military support. U.S. law enforcement officials are now aboard the ship. There were no reports of shots fired during the boarding. The seizure comes after the tanker was tracked near Scotland, drawing criticism from Moscow, which says the vessel was operating in international waters under Russian law. The U.S. has also seized 2 other sanctioned tankers near Venezuela in recent weeks as part of its blockade of illicit oil shipments. In a separate operation, the U.S. Southern Command said it captured a second Venezuela-linked tanker in the Caribbean Sea. In a social media post, Southern Command said the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless, sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The vessel is known as the Sophia. Southern Command said it was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting the ship to the U.S. And more developments from Venezuela. President Trump announced yesterday the U.S. will soon receive 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil in the near future. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus a look at how Chinese defense systems in Venezuela failed to impress.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the oil the U.S. receives from Venezuela will be sold at market price and that money will be controlled by him as President of the United States. Trump says he will ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The transfer could be worth nearly $3 billion, with oil trading at roughly $56 a barrel. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum discusses utilizing oil from Venezuela, speaking on Fox News.
You need to dilute that heavy crude with a lighter product. And of course, we have an excess of that lighter product here because the shale oils that come out of the shale revolution in America are perfect for blending. It's great news for jobs. It's great news for gas prices going forward. It's great news for America, and it's great news for Venezuela.
Burgum says Venezuela has an opportunity now to have capital come in and rebuild their economy.
They have larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world. Venezuela, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, pushed back on UN criticism of the Maduro operation, speaking on Fox News.
I don't know why they're so upset. As I pointed out at the Security Council, over 50 countries didn't even recognize Maduro because he stole the election. So it's hard to figure out what they're so upset about. Well, I think we know the answer. It's because it's President Trump, and he's a man of action and took real action.
Waltz says the Venezuelan people are going to be better off.
And look, at the end of the day, this was the right thing to do. President Trump took bold action and will continue to swing and doge that ridiculous organization called the United Nations.
The lightning operation to capture Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, punched in and out of Caracas before its air defenses could mount an effective response. The raid raised uncomfortable questions for China about the limits of the Chinese-supplied systems that Venezuela has leaned on, especially anti-stealth radar that China advertised as capable of spotting and stopping U.S. stealth aircraft. Analyst Yu Tsung-chi, a retired major general from Taiwan, says the operation suggested deeper weaknesses, corruption in China's defense industry, and a lack of reliability of the technology and command structure meant to tie those systems together. Yu described it as a system built to look modern on paper and intimidating in propaganda, but falls apart under the demands of real combat. Yu says neither Chinese or Russian air defense systems made the slightest bit of difference once the U.S. brought real-time intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision weapons to bear. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And starting with new developments surrounding the many social services fraud scandals gaining national attention, Somalia's UN representative is associated with an Ohio healthcare agency that had been punished for fraud. That's according to the Department of Health and Human Services. Specifically, Abubakar Dahir Osman is now deemed to be connected to Progressive Healthcare Services, which HHS had to take action against for Medicaid fraud. Notably, the Somali community in Minnesota was tied to a massive fraud scandal involving childcare and other services. Let's unpack this with our panel. Please welcome Mike Leon, host of the podcast Can We Please Talk, and Rachel Sheffield, a welfare research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. It's great to have you with us. Mike, can you give us your reaction and the big picture of what this means for taxpayers and the Somali community?
Yeah, it's good to see you, Kevin, as always. The initial reaction to this, and I know that there's some statements that have been made by HHS. I know RFK didn't comment, but I know that Jim O'Neill did. And, it's the initial reaction, the same one I had to what's happening in Minnesota, right? Like, where was this being uncovered? Why didn't we know about this sooner? I know, obviously, the Minnesota stuff is a little bit different because it got uncovered in 2022 and in the lead up to, and local media was covering it more than national media. But my initial reaction is the same that I would have regardless of who it is. It's like, why aren't we uncovering some of this sooner? And some of these programs are getting abused. And I feel for the people that the programs are meant to actually help. And we have people like this that are undermining the reason why we have these programs put in place. And I'm glad that at least these things are starting to come home to roost and some of these investigations are starting to be done.
Mike, thanks for kicking this off. Now, Rachel, in regards to Osman's connection to Progressive, how do these sorts of fraud schemes work and whom do they affect the most?
Yeah, well, basically what we saw in Minnesota, excuse me, is that you have money being passed from the federal government to states and to these nonprofits, and then being doled out. That's how they're supposed to work, but. So money was going to these nonprofits, but they were not actually using them for what they were claiming. They were instead pocketing the money, using it for things like fancy vacations, luxury cars, etc. And the problem is this exposes, the problem. One of the main problems with our U.S. welfare system is that. We take money from the federal level, we hand it out to states to dole out, and that's kind of considered the measure of success. How much money we can get, it's based on outputs rather than inputs, which is the wrong type of, that's just incentivizes, that just makes it so much easier for this type of fraud to occur when you have a system that's based on this type of incentive, rather than looking at, hey, outputs. What are we actually doing? Are we getting people off programs? Are we getting them into work? We base success on how much money we can transfer.
Rachel, yes. And before we move on, what are these incentives? How do we build more of that into this whole program to prevent some of this from happening?
Yeah, so handing money down from federal government to states or to nonprofits is a recipe for inefficiency. When you have more financial skin in the game, so if states were required to pay more, that would be one way. But most of federal welfare assistance, and which there is well over $1 trillion. And 90 different programs, and these are just a few programs that we're talking about here in these particular instances. But yeah, passing that money down to states pay typically very, very little of that. So there's not a lot of financial incentive for states to make sure that money is going to those who are in need. So that would be one way. If we required states to pay more now, and then also if we said, look, we're going to we're like, let's pay for outcomes instead of inputs for some of these programs. If we said, hey, are you actually getting people, improving children's well-being? Are we seeing, people move forward in their life so they can get off of these programs rather than, being on these programs, rather than measuring success on, hey, if you have more people on the rolls, we'll give you more money. We should be focusing on outputs and how we're actually helping people improve their lives.
Very logical, Rachel. And of course, that would push the fraudsters out of the picture because the fraudsters aren't getting any results, so they're going to be defunded. Now, there's another part of this broader fraud story, and that's that the Trump administration is freezing billions of dollars of funding to blue states. The administration alleges Democratic-run states and their governors are complicit in allowing fraud to occur under their purview. Now, Mike, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand calls this political retribution. Is the administration going about this the right way? Cut the funds, then take the next step? Or are there different ways to address this that can bring more national unity? And what we just heard the panel talking about, making sure that people who need these resources actually get them while also rooting out corruption.
Yeah, Kevin, well, here's the problem, right? The conversation about this has to be on the up and up, right? It doesn't matter if it's a D next to your name or an R next to your name, like we saw in Mississippi with the misabuse of TANF funds by the former governor there and Brett Favre and some other high prominent folks, or in Minnesota with a governor with a D next to his name and what we saw with Feeding Our Families and the nonprofit scheme that was underway there. So it has to, the administration, the intent behind it just needs to be a little bit more reined in. It's not necessarily intentional. The intentionality has to be around blue states. It has to also be around red states if they're participating in this, because it's not about blue and red. It's about what you said before, Kevin, which is taxpayer dollars that are being misappropriated and the people that actually need the help with these programs to be able to apply to these programs, but they're not able to because people are stealing these funds, right? We've got a lot of bad actors that are in this nonprofit space that end up getting federal funding. So I think I agree with the overall intention, but again, I'm more of these people that are right down the middle because I don't care if there's a D or an R next to their name. If you're stealing millions of dollars, especially of taxpayer dollars, and it's going to programs that do benefit people that are low income and really can't fend for themselves, that is wrong, and you should be charged with a crime. I'm glad that Governor Walz is dropping out of the race, seeing that he doesn't have the support of local legislators anymore, and all of this that has happened since 2019 under his purview. I'm glad that that's happening, but also if it was a Republican governor, it should be happening just with the same level of ire and emphasis. And so that's what I would direct the administration. But unfortunately, the administration is only aiming it right now at California and some of these other blue states. So Kirsten Gillibrand is half right, but she's not right about the other part, that it should be about anybody, regardless of R or D next to their name.
Yeah, Mike, and that's $10 billion that President Trump is planning to freeze here. And that's Colorado, Illinois, other states that you mentioned too. And Governor Walz, he says that he's going to push off his reelection campaign in order to combat the fraud. Now, Rachel, what are the practical steps to identify fraud, bring justice, and ensure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, so I think kind of going back to what I said, for one, we have this massive welfare system, and I think, most of it, again, it's federal dollars going to states. States have very little financial skin in the game. So increasing the amount that states are asked to pay for, to match more of this funding that they receive from the federal government, so that there's more financial incentive for states to ensure that, that benefits are going to those who need them most. That would be a good place to start. And then basing grants to organizations based on outputs more so than inputs would be policy changes that could help reduce the likelihood of fraud and ensure that our welfare system is actually helping people move forward in their lives.
Well, right. Of course, you want to give people the chance to get back on their feet and then contribute to society. That's what these are for. But again, the fraudsters are the X factor here. Now, these fraud concerns spread far and wide, with the governor of Texas now probing potential abuse of funds for the state's child care services program. Mike, are we seeing a domino effect in the wake of the Minnesota fraud scandal, in which more and more states are taking a hardline stance on fraud to address the public disgust in this?
Yeah, well, the Texas one is a little bit interesting because obviously there's not as much fraud to the level of Minnesota. And I'm using fraud kind of broadly here, just based off Texas's own data and the numbers that they've put out. I saw Governor Abbott's statement and what he sent over to his health department and in terms of trying to crack down on this. But again, within their own numbers, they've admitted that it's less than 1% that they feel like are funds that are being misappropriated or misdirected and things like that. So I do think that other states are now on notice. You just mentioned it before about, the federal funds that are being frozen from some of the blue states. I know the blue states are on notice, and I know the red states obviously have cooperated with some of the other investigations that have been done, whether it be with the Agriculture Department, et cetera. So I think all the states are on notice right now, because they all get federal funding to some degree, right? So if you do have some bad actors that are trying to manipulate the system, I would hope that every governor out there is definitely taking a look at the books, having independent, agencies or orgs come in to kind of look to make sure that everything is on the up and up with respect to all of these programs that are getting federal assistance or federal funding.
That's a great broad view, Mike. Now, Rachel, the Texas State Commission in charge of the investigations, they already have procedures in place to prevent fraud, such as audits, in-person visits, and so on. Now, what can be done to ensure that taxpayer money meant to help families and children isn't wasted?
Yeah, well, I think, these fraud investigations, what happened in Minnesota, this is, I think, definitely heightening awareness and helping, alerting more governors and policymakers to this issue. So that's the silver lining here. But again, we do have this broken welfare system that has been in place for 60 years, beginning in 1960s with the War on Poverty. And this is also a call for the need to just reform our broader welfare system. Again, making sure that we have a system that is not just based on inputs. Hey, more money, great. More people on the rolls, you get more money from the federal government. We need to just completely reform the way that welfare is. That we base welfare on, not how many people are on the rolls as the measure of success, but how are we actually helping these families get, parents have jobs so that they're not having to rely on government assistance. So it's just what has happened here is, again, just should be a wake-up call to policymakers for the need to reform our massive federal welfare system that, again, over $1 trillion, 90 different programs. It has continued to grow and grow while self-sufficiency in the United States has remained flat. So we have a major problem here. Fraud is part of that, but it is just another symptom of our overall broken welfare system.
I hear your input. Now, Michael Leon and Rachel Sheffield, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The House Oversight Committee is questioning Minnesota state lawmakers over alleged misuse of federal funds in the state. We're turning back into that right now.
Agency, and it's unacceptable.
Unbelievable. And we want to work with you. We want to work with these whistleblowers. We're serious about this. The Trump administration's on the ground. We want to catch these people, and we want to put them behind bars, and we want to hold any politician that participated in these schemes accountable. Representative Hudson, who's to blame for this dysfunction?
Well, the blame can go around quite a bit, but as Tim Walz himself said, the buck stops with him.
Representative Robbins, do you have any examples of how the Walz administration blocked investigators from moving forward with high-priority fraud investigations?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman. I've met with whistleblowers and gotten documents from them about how after the original CCAP whistleblower report came out in March and April of 2019, subsequent to that, there was an Office of Inspector General within DHS that had investigative authority to do surveillance, warrants, and seize electronics, and they were shut down. They were told they could no longer do criminal investigations. They were told they could no longer meet with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension agents that were assigned to them without supervisor's approval. And instead, when they found one of the other members talked about how they changed the language. They went from calling it fraud to calling it overbilling. And they created an overbilling committee to all the investigative agents now couldn't do criminal investigations, and they had to flag issues of overbilling, and then a committee would decide if any of that overbilling would be recouped.
Committee appointed by Walz?
No, appointed within DHS.
Oh, appointed by the own bureaucracy.
Yes, so they shut down criminal investigations. They created a committee to call it overbilling and decide if overbilling investigations would even try to recoup the money.
This is evidence that Tim Walz interfered with investigators who knew there was fraud. The rumors of fraud have been taking place. I've been hearing them for a decade, and yet he interfered to try to obstruct their investigation of fraud.
Yes, his agencies shut down criminal investigations.
Representative Hudson, we didn't get $9 billion stolen overnight. How did the fraud in Minnesota become so widespread?
Well, listen, let me give the maximum benefit of the doubt that these programs were designed for a beneficial legislative intent.
Of course.
The way that it happened was by when people recognized that the system wasn't working and they raised those concerns were ignored, and a culture suppressing raising those concerns was fostered by the Walz administration.
So obviously there was a lack of oversight by the Walz administration. Why would Governor Walz let $9 billion in fraud occur? Mr. Hudson.
In my opinion, because it was politically beneficial to Democrats. Again, the Somali community is a huge constituency group, and we've had some tight races in Minnesota, and it makes a difference for them.
And we have another hearing for you. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is addressing the media. She's joined by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Let's tune to the press briefing.
And around the world, I will be happy to take all of your questions on all of that news. But first, I'm really honored to be standing up here today with esteemed members of the President's Cabinet and his health team to make an important announcement with respect to the President's domestic promise to make America healthy again as we kick off the new year. In less than a year in office, the President and his incredible MAHA team have made real progress on this front. Here are just a few of the significant MAHA achievements thus far. More than a dozen food manufacturers and trade associations have made commitments to remove artificial and petroleum-based food dyes from their products. The Trump administration took strong action to bar hospitals from performing dangerous, irreversible, life-altering transgender procedures on children. The Trump administration announced funding awards to states through the Rural Health Transformation Program, an unprecedented $50 billion investment established under President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. The Trump administration has also worked with 18 states across the country to ban junk food purchases using SNAP benefits starting this year. And thank you for leading that effort, Secretary Rollins. Additionally, President Trump took historic action to secure most favored nation drug pricing and secured deals with major pharmaceutical companies to massively lower the cost of prescription drugs. And those effects are being implemented as we speak. Americans are going to continue to see the result of these incredible deals the president cut. And I know President Trump and this team behind me worked incredibly hard to lower those drug costs for Americans. On Monday, the CDC adopted common sense updates to America's childhood vaccination schedule based solely on the gold standard of science. This action empowers parents and physicians to make the best individualized decisions to protect our children, while also restoring much-needed confidence in our public health system. And as a MAHA mom myself, I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Secretary Kennedy. To build on this progress, the Trump administration is now updating federal nutrition standards and guidelines to ensure that Americans have the most accurate, data-driven information supported by science and hard facts, not special interests or partisan ideology. President Trump has tasked two of the great individuals behind me, USDA Secretary Rollins and HHS Secretary Kennedy, with collaborating on this vitally important project. And today they are here to officially unveil the 2025 to 2030 dietary guidelines for America. These new guidelines are informed by the best and most reliable research on health and nutrition, particularly as it relates to the role of our diets and the prevalence of chronic disease in the country. They are also These guidelines are easy to read and understand, so every American, young and old, can access this information that literally has the power to change lives. But these are not just an updated guideline. These are the foundation to all federal food programs in our country. These new guidelines are going to update the food that is served to America's children in our public schools, to the plates that are served to our great men in uniform in our military, our veterans, and the food that they are consuming at the VA. And these new guidelines are also going to impact nutritional programs for the needy in our country, such as WIC and Head Start. Unfortunately, for decades, federal dollars has promoted low-quality, highly processed foods that lead to scores of long-term health issues, which means Americans have gone broke because of these health issues. Faulty dietary guidelines of the past stacked the deck against healthy eating and food options for everyday American families, which has fueled the chronic disease epidemic and jacked up the healthcare costs of households across the country. This failed approach in our public health system ends today. When these guidelines are followed, Americans will be saving themselves thousands of dollars. If we want to cut healthcare costs in our country, we must become a healthier country. According to the CEA, poor diet is the root cause of obesity, which accounts for $400 billion in medical spending each year. A healthier America will lead to a more affordable America. The new dietary guidelines from the Trump administration will ensure federal dollars go to real food to improve public health and therefore save the American people their hard-earned cash over the course of their lives. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Secretary Kennedy. The great people behind me will give remarks, and then we'll get into Q&A for the officials that are here on this specific topic. They will leave because they're all very busy people, and then I will open it up to Q&A with the rest of you on the rest of the news in the world. So thank you, and we'll start with Secretary Kennedy.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Today marks a decisive change in federal nutrition policy, made possible by President Trump's leadership and the work of MAHA moms and public health advocates who demanded reform. Today, in accordance with President Trump's directive, Brooke and I will release the dietary guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in history. These guidelines replace corporate-driven assumptions with common sense goals and gold standard scientific integrity. These new guidelines will revolutionize our nation's food culture and make America healthy again. For decades, Americans have grown sicker while healthcare costs have soared. The reason is clear. The hard truth is that our government has been lying to us to protect corporate profit-taking, telling us that these food-like substances were beneficial to public health. Federal policy promoted and subsidized highly processed foods and refined carbohydrates and turned a blind eye to the disastrous consequences. Today, the lies stop. The new guidelines recognize that whole, nutrient-dense food is the most effective path to better health and lower healthcare costs. Protein and healthy fats are essential and were wrongly discouraged in prior dietary guidelines. We are ending the war on saturated fats. Diets rich in vegetables and fruits reduce disease risk more effectively than many drugs. Whole grains outperform refined carbohydrates. Added sugars, especially sugar-sweetened beverages, drive metabolic disease, and today our government declares war on added sugar. Highly processed foods loaded with additives, added sugar, and excess salt damage health and should be avoided. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, my message is clear: eat real food. Nothing matters more for healthcare outcomes, economic productivity, military readiness, and fiscal stability. The dietary guidelines shape dozens of federal feeding programs, including Head Start. These standards affect 45 million school lunches every day, meals for 1.3 million active duty service members, and food served to 9 million veterans in VA hospitals. Today begins the work of aligning those programs with affordable, whole, nutrient-dense food. Implementation requires coordination across the government. I'm working with many of my fellow cabinet secretaries to deliver results. I want to thank Bobby Mukamala, thank you very much, who is the president of the American Medical Association, for committing to mobilize the medical community on nutrition. And I thank also the American Academy of Pediatrics for partnering on this effort. I also look forward to working with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Marty McCary to fund and prioritize rigorous nutrition research at the NIH and at the FDA. The stakes are measurable and severe. A Johns Hopkins analysis estimates that 48% of every federal taxpayer dollar now goes to health care. The CDC reports that 90% of health care spending treats chronic disease. That means that 40%, 40 cents of every dollar that taxpayers pay in this country is going to treat diseases that could be averted through good food. The United States has the highest obesity and type 2 diabetes rate in the developed world. We spend 3 times more per capita than the European Union on health care, yet our life expectancy is 5 years lower, largely due to diet-related chronic disease. Our childhood obesity rate is 5 times higher than countries like France. 1/3 of U.S. teens have prediabetes, over 35% are overweight or obese, and 20% of young adults have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. 77% of military-aged Americans are ineligible for military service because of diet-related conditions. If a foreign adversary sought to destroy the health of our children, to cripple our economy, to weaken our national security, there would be no better strategy than to addict us to ultra-processed foods. It's shocking that our own government helped to drive these cataclysmic changes in our diet. The damage is real, it is preventable, and President Trump has ordered it to end. If the United States reduced obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's to Japanese levels, we would save approximately $600 billion a year. About 50% of Medicare's projected long-term deficit, or $5,000 per family annually. Current policy worsens the problem. 42 million Americans rely on SNAP, where common purchases include sugary drinks, candy, and chips. 78% of SNAP recipients are enrolled in Medicaid, and 90% of Medicaid spending goes to chronic disease. These incentives raise healthcare costs and undermine health. This must change. The new framework centers on protein and healthy fats, vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. And you can see the food pyramid here. It's upside down, a lot of you will say. But it was actually upside down before, and we just righted it. For the first time, the dietary guidelines directly address ultra-processed foods and set firm sugar limits in federal procurement, driving a significant reduction in added sugar in school meals. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership and the partners committed to ensuring that federal food dollars support real food and better health. Thank you. And I want to introduce my partner and a friend, Brooke Rollins, who was an extraordinary collaborator on this.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. What a honor to be here. I think this is Caroline's first press conference back, and what a great way to start the new year, 2026. I want to thank Secretary Kennedy. Your commitment to the well-being of Americans is such a blessing to this nation. We have been working on these new dietary guidelines really since almost day one. Bobby and I were voted on the same day and sworn in on the same day. So I think the partnership from minute one has been real and extraordinary. As Secretary Kennedy mentioned, America is in the middle of the worst chronic health crisis in our nation's history. Over 40% of the roughly 73 million children in the United States have at least one chronic health condition, and nearly 90% of healthcare spending goes toward treating people with chronic disease. Secretary Kennedy mentioned that, but it is really important to keep underscoring that fact. This crisis is unacceptable. It prevents Americans from living healthy and happy lives. And for decades under both Republicans and Democrats, federal incentives have promoted low quality, highly processed foods and pharmaceutical interventions instead of prevention. As a result, nutrient-dense whole foods grown by America's farmers and ranchers have been increasingly displaced. The Trump administration is acutely aware of this danger, and today this announcement is making a major step in doing something about it. Thankfully, the solution is simple and should be non-controversial. Eat real food. This is the main message of the new dietary guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, which encourage households and schools to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods. That means more protein, more dairy, more healthy fats, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, whether they are fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. We are finally putting real food back at the center of the American diet. Real food that nourishes the body, restores health, fuels energy, and builds strength. This pivot also leans into the abundant, affordable, and healthy food supply already available from America's incredible farmers and ranchers. By making milk, raising cattle, and growing wholesome fruits, vegetables, and grains, they hold the key to solving our national health crisis. And President Trump is mobilizing government to ensure families across America have greater access to these healthy foods. In the past 12 months, inflation has slowed and wages have risen for the first time in 5 years. Under President Trump's leadership, prices for everyday staples are declining, and more help is on the way. Recent data show that fruits, vegetables, dairy, and proteins, including eggs, pork, and ground beef, are becoming even more affordable every day for our American people. American households enjoy the most affordable and abundant food in the world, and today's release only reinforces that reality. A healthy meal is within reach for all American families. These new dietary guidelines are a framework which is meant to be customized to meet the needs, the preferences, and the financial status of all American families. For example, a meal including such items as pork, or eggs, or whole milk, or cheese, tomatoes, other fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables, whole grain bread, corn tortilla can cost today right around $3 for that meal. $3. And soon USDA will finalize our stocking standards, which means that those businesses in America that take the SNAP benefit, what they are required to stock in order to take that benefit, by the way, that's almost 250,000 retailers across America, that very soon we will be finalizing that rule that will mandate all 250,000 retailers in America double the type of staple foods that they provide for America's SNAP households. This means healthier options will be in reach for all American families, regardless of circumstance, at levels never seen before in our country. These dietary guidelines are foundational to so many USDA programs, and their introduction marks the first step in connecting America's schools and dinner plates to the best of American agriculture. Make no mistake, under President Trump's leadership, we are restoring common sense, we are restoring scientific integrity, and we are restoring accountability to federal food and health policy. The new guidelines are all about putting the well-being of Americans first, exactly where it should have been all along. This is the foundation that will make America healthy again, not just for those of us alive today, but for our children and our children's children and those coming behind. I want to end by saying God bless American families, God bless the American farmer and rancher, and God bless America. What an honor now to introduce another great partner in this incredible work, and that is Dr. Mehmet Oz. Thank you.
Congratulations to Secretary Rollins, Secretary Kennedy, and do want to express my appreciation for what the President has done overall to increase the affordability of health care. The biggest accomplishment, perhaps, for the health system, ability to drop down prices last year was the most favored nation drug pricing that Caroline mentioned. These are incredibly effective at reducing the cost, for example, of what the President calls the fat shot. The Ozempic, GLP-1s category of medications. We dropped them dramatically. But the best way to reduce drug spend in America is to not need the drugs in the first place. What you're hearing today with these dietary guideline adjustments are going to be massively effective, and not just dropping the need for us to buy these weight loss drugs, but buy these expensive drugs for autoimmune problems. We have evidence that food is medicine when it comes to conditions as varied as mental health issues from Alzheimer's and depression to fundamental realities of how children learn in school. So the question then becomes, what is this actually going to do in dollars and cents? And I had the group at CMS run some numbers for us to try to give you concrete assessments of how much this will drop the spend that the federal taxpayer must make for Medicare and Medicaid. And I'm more optimistic today than ever that we can address the fast rising rate of healthcare expenses in America because of movements like this. Right now, we're increasing health expenditures in America at roughly twice the rate of the GDP growth. We will correct that if we can get America to be healthier, because you can't be a wealthy nation without being a healthy nation. So 2 numbers for you to remember. The first is $30 billion. Why? 30% of healthcare costs are directly attributable to obesity. I'm not talking about indirect associated expenses, which are also present, but a very conservative number, 30%, are directly attributed to obesity. That's about $300 billion a year for just Medicare. If we were to affect obesity by 10%, which is an incredibly conservative and justifiable assumption that has been borne out in evidence-based dietary experiments and trials, just that alone is $30 billion of reduction of expenses for Medicare. That's also obviously correlated with Medicaid reduction in spending. In Medicaid, it's a different opportunity, because in Medicaid, we educate children. 53% of children in America are covered by Medicaid or CHIP. And we have programs to teach kids and their parents what to eat, and how to make these dietary guidelines that Secretary Rollins and Secretary Kennedy have crafted with their teams into practice. It will dramatically change the natural history of how children are able to participate in life. But let me give you one last number. If we're able to get the average American, who today retires on average at age 61, get them just to work 1 year longer, because they feel so vital, so strong, so bullish about their future, because they're feeding their bodies nutrients that are essential to their high-functioning productivity, we will increase the overall GDP of our nation by trillions of dollars. So we will reduce healthcare expenses. At the same time, we jazz up the U.S. economy with trillions of dollars created by the productivity of American workers. God bless you both for making the DGA feasible and making it perhaps the wisest investment we could make in our communities. Marty Makary is one of my closest friends, the powerful leader of the FDA, who's been taking brave steps along the line and has additional insights.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Oz. Today marks the beginning of the end of an era of medical dogma on nutrition. For decades, we've been fed a corrupt food pyramid that has had a myopic focus on demonizing natural, healthy, saturated fats, telling you not to eat eggs and steak, and ignoring a giant blind spot: refined carbohydrates, added sugars, ultra-processed food. This study in JAMA now shows that 60% to 70% of kids are getting their calories from ultra-processed foods. That's an epidemic. We now have a generation of kids addicted to refined carbohydrates, low in protein. They are literally nitrogen negative because we've used old flawed studies that used urine nitrogen to estimate body protein metabolism, and they missed the mark. The old guidelines had such a low protein recommendation that we are increasing that by 50 to 100%. Kids need protein. The old protein guidelines were to prevent starvation and withering away. These new protein guidelines are designed for American kids to thrive, and they're based on science, not on dogma. We have 40% of our kids now with a chronic disease. It is not their fault. This is something that is the result of bad advice from the government and a medical establishment that for decades peddled research from a flawed 1960s model. Today, we are setting the record straight. This is not a willpower problem of our nation's kids. This is something adults have done to kids, and we're going to fix it. And so, as Dr. Oz said, the best way to lower drug prices is for people to stop taking drugs they don't need. We are going to finally address the root causes of our broken healthcare system: insulin resistance and general body inflammation, advanced by the protein poor, micronutrient poor, ultra processed refined carbohydrate diet that kids are addicted to today. And so on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration, we are proud to be a part of this. We are grateful to be contributing to this work. Thank you, Secretary Rollins. Thank you, Kyle Diamantis, the best deputy commissioner for food at the FDA the agency has ever had. This is a historic day in America. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope everyone's inspired to go eat a salad for lunch after this briefing. If anybody has questions on this topic, we will take a few and then we'll get into the topic. We'll start with our new media seat. If you have a question on this topic today, Jamie Franklin, she comes from the Conservator. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, first of all, Caroline, congratulations on your pregnancy. We're so excited for you.
Thank you.
MAHA moms across the country, including myself, are just so excited by what this administration is doing to make our kids healthy again. But, you know, we do have concerns when it comes to these blue states pushing back on a lot of progress that we're making as an administration. And particularly, we're really excited that you guys revised and streamlined this vaccine schedule. However, what we have seen is that these blue states, whether it be, you know, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, or pushing back on immigration, they continue to stop your guys' progress. So what has been the response from these blue states? Because as MAHA moms enrolling our kids in school, this is a big issue, and we celebrate what you guys are doing, but we want to have it, you know, even in the blue states as well.
I mean, my hope is that we only released these earlier, 2 days earlier. I'm sorry.
Duck is also high in protein.
It's an interesting.
Duck is a good thing to eat, everybody.
They only released the new vaccine schedule 2 days ago. The vaccine schedule, there's nothing compulsory in it. Everybody, I've always promised, I'm not going to take people's vaccines away from them. People who want to get vaccines, everybody who wants them can get all of the vaccines that were on the old schedule. They will all be paid for by the Vaccines for Children program or for the insurance the same as before. We release guidelines that we think are optimal to public health. They're the same with core vaccines that are required by the European community. And those nations all have much better health outcomes than we do. And they're based on their best science and also on their conviction that when you put too many vaccines on the program, it actually reduces compliance. It reduces uptake. And so we want to maximize the uptake of vaccines by making sure that Americans know that we are making recommendations that are science-based, that are common sense, that are grounded in science. And right now, that's the best science that we have. But again, there's 3 categories of vaccine. One is the core schedule, which resembles the European countries. The second is for people who have vulnerabilities, for high risk, and that doesn't change at all. And then the third is shared decision making, which any vaccine that was on the old schedule, you can continue to get. So people will make their own choices, and that's what democracy is about.
I asked the boss, Caroline, for permission to add a little bit to this because I think it's really important. And by the way, Jamie, what a superstar you are. It's so fun to see you in this seat, Jamie Franklin. The blue state question is a really important one. And for those of us that are running agencies with these programs, I mean, I've talked to a lot of you already about how we have 22 blue states that won't give us their SNAP data so that we can figure out and ensure that those who really need these programs are actually getting these programs. Clearly, you all have been writing about Minnesota. California is next. We're looking at New York, some other states. The amount of fraud in all of these programs is absolutely stunning. And the challenge is, I mean, from Medicaid, et cetera, I know, Dr. Oz, you've talked a lot about that. This is a significant problem, and I think who's really harmed in all of this conversation and when these blue states aren't partnering with us to try to do this right is we say blue states and red states, but in those states there are all kinds of our citizenry and that aren't all Democrat or aren't all Republican. We had a poll that just came out that had about 85% of all Americans believe that states should turn their data over on SNAP so that we can figure out where the fraud is and ensure these programs are going where they need to go. So my request of these blue states and these blue state governors is partner with us. Let us figure out how to do this better. Let us make sure that whether it's the vaccine schedule or the SNAP program or the Medicaid program or the child care program, that we are doing everything we can to protect every tax dollar, but to also ensure those who need it the most vulnerable in our society, are getting the programs they need versus those who A, are not even supposed to be here, or B, are cheating the system.
Thanks, Caroline. One of the changes that was made had to do with alcohol. Secretary Kennedy or Dr. Oz, could you explain the science behind the new language on not saying 2 drinks for men and 1 drink for a woman every day would be healthy, and whether or not the industry had an impact on the language of moderation versus just saying alcohol is not healthy and you shouldn't drink it?
So alcohol is a social lubricant that brings people together. In the best case scenario, I don't think you should drink alcohol, but it does allow people an excuse to bond and socialize, and there's probably nothing healthier than having a good time with friends in a safe way. If you look at the blue zones, for example, around the world where people live the longest, alcohol is sometimes part of their diet. Again, small amounts, taken very judiciously and usually in a celebratory fashion. So there is alcohol on these dietary guidelines, but the implication is don't have it for breakfast. Right, this should be something done in a small amount with hopefully some kind of an event that might have alcohol added. But the general move away from 2 glasses of men, 1 glass of women, there was never really good data to support that quantity of alcohol consumption. That data was probably primarily confused with broader data about social connectiveness.
Take a couple more. John?
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Secretary Rollins, I'm curious about with these guidelines. They're not mandates, they're guidelines. What are the practical effects of these guidelines on public schools all across the country?
Well, today begins thank you, John. It's good to see you. Today begins the first day now in a recalibration of the rules, whether it's school lunches, whether it's the SNAP program, whether it's that veterans were mentioned, our prison system, that now we begin the process of implementing and redrafting the rules to reflect what this new dietary guidelines for Americans actually is doing to our food system. So there is a lot of work to do. Nothing changes overnight, but as I think we've proven, this administration moves very, very quickly on all fronts, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and so you'll begin to see some real changes coming very soon. As everyone is aware, for many of our most vulnerable in the margins in our communities, the school lunch is often the best place for our children to get the healthiest meal. Hopefully with stocking standards and reworking SNAP and the SNAP waivers we've done, that begins to change too. But right now, that is going to be the single most important, from my perspective, move forward, is the school lunches and making sure that we're getting the right amount, the best amount, and most nutrient-dense foods into the schools. Thank you.
You also mentioned, Secretary Rollins, cost when you had your remarks a little bit earlier. Is eating healthier more cost effective? Is it cheaper than just having a diet of processed foods?
I had a whole chart to show you, but left it in the back, unfortunately, that yes, indeed, that eating healthy, for the most part, we've got 100 simulations, is actually less expensive. The challenge is the access to those healthy foods, especially in parts of America where they have food deserts. They don't have a H-E-B or a Kroger or a Central Market. These are all Texan grocery stores, but whatever similar across the country. But that is why these stocking standards in SNAP are so important. So if you have a economically challenged family and the only place they're getting their food is the 7-Eleven, we have a longer term important policy priority, and that is getting grocery stores into these lower margin communities. But for now, requiring those retailers, those 250,000 retailers across America, to double their stocking of healthier foods, that will allow us to immediately get these better foods into all communities, but especially the
That was MAHA officials rolling out what they call a bombshell new dietary guidelines. It seems to be an inverted food pyramid, minimizing those refined grains and maximizing protein and fruits and vegetables. And on next, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth held a closed, classified briefing today on Venezuela for the full U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. They spoke to reporters a while ago. Take a listen.
Why are you saying this behind closed doors?
Well, there's a lot of operational details that can't be discussed publicly, obviously, for obvious reasons. So as we move forward, we'll describe our process, which is a threefold process in Venezuela. I've described it to them now. Step one is the stabilization of the country. We don't want it descending into chaos. Part of that stabilization, and the reason why we understand and believe that we have the strongest leverage possible, is our quarantine. As you've seen today, 2 more ships were seized. We are in the midst right now and, in fact, about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair. Also, at the same time, begin to create the process of reconciliation nationally within Venezuela so that the opposition forces can be amnestied and released and from prisons or brought back to the country and begin to rebuild civil society. And then the third phase, of course, will be one of transition. Some of this will overlap. I've described this to them in great detail. We'll have more detail in the days to follow. But we feel like we're moving forward here in a very positive way.
How long will this take, Secretary? Some senators who were in that briefing describing your operation variously as that you're winging it, that there's no plan for Venezuela going forward.
Yeah, I know. They're going to say that. I used to be a senator, too. That's what you always say when it's the other party. The bottom line is we've gone into great detail with them about the planning. We've described it to them. In fact, it's not just winging it. It's not just saying or speculating it's going to happen. It's already happening. Like the oil arrangement that we've made with PDVSA on their sanctioned oil that they can't move. Understand, they are not generating any revenue from their oil right now. They can't move it unless we allow it to move because we have sanctions, because we're enforcing those sanctions. This is tremendous leverage. We are exercising it in a positive way. The president described it last night. Secretary will have more to say on it today, who is involved in running this portfolio. And we feel very positive that not only will that generate revenue that will be used to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, and we're ensured that that's what the case is, but it also gives us an amount of leverage and influence and control over how this process moves forward.
Mr. Secretary, on Denmark, sir. Mr. Secretary, on Denmark, why has the administration not taken Denmark's offer to discuss the situation in Greenland? And
I'll be meeting with them next week.
But will you take military intervention off the table?
I'm not here to talk about Denmark or military intervention. I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. And but I'm not having anything further to add to that today.
Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
What? Made a statement last night saying that the military option.
He's lost a lot of weight. Good job.
They said the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead?
Guys,
military option?
What I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Venezuela, the people of Venezuela are waking up to the same regime. Do you not worry about that?
Well, first of all, the bottom line is that there is a process now in place where we have tremendous control and leverage over what those interim authorities are doing and are able to do. But obviously this will be a process of transition. In the end, it will be up to the Venezuelan people to transform their country. We are prepared under the right conditions, using the leverage that we have, which includes the fact that they cannot move any oil unless we allow them to move it to. Well, again, I'm not going to give you a timeline on it. We want it to move as soon as possible. But we didn't expect this would. It's been 3 days since this happened, 4 days since this happened. So I understand that in this cycle and society we now live in, everyone wants instant outcomes. They want it to happen overnight. It's not going to work that way. But we're already seeing progress with this new deal that's been announced and more deals to follow. You're already seeing how the leverage the United States has over those interim authorities is going to begin to lead to positive outcomes. It doesn't cost us. It doesn't cost us.
The involvement, the U.S. involvement in Venezuela, how much will it cost?
Well, it isn't going to cost us any money. For example, this oil deal that's happening doesn't cost us any money. On the contrary, and if it opens up,
no money.
Well, look, I can't. I don't have the numbers. What operation are you talking about? The entire thing?
Yeah.
Well, these troops are going to be deployed. None of these troops sit in a dry dock waiting for action. They're deployed somewhere in the world. If they're not here, they're somewhere else. Just today, our forces not deployed to the Caribbean seized a boat, a sanctioned boat tied to the IRGC that tried to flee from us. That happened somewhere else. We are constantly involved in action. We have boats in the Mediterranean. We have ships in the Middle East. We have ships in the Indo-Pacific. These ships, if they weren't in the Caribbean, they'd be somewhere else conducting activity. Yeah. That's what the Navy does. Yeah.
I want to emphasize that question from CNN. The question's never asked how much does it cost when they're in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. But now that they're in our hemisphere on a counter-cartel mission or ensuring that an indicted individual comes to justice, now you're asking the question of cost. It's a disingenuous question to begin with. You're trying to find any angle possible to undermine the success of one of the most historic military missions the world has ever seen. The level of sophistication that Senate just was briefed on and the House was briefed on, a classified level, is something only the United States of America can accomplish. The world is taking notice of that. Certainly Venezuela is taking notice of that. And it continues because 2 oil tankers, 2 overnight, were seized by the United States of America, stateless or sanctioned, because the oil blockade, the quarantine of oil out of unsanctioned or stateless, sanctioned or stateless vessels continues. That leverage will continue as Secretary Rubio outlined. So our military is prepared to continue this. As he said, the president, when he speaks, he means it. He's not messing around. We are an administration of action to advance our interests, and that is on full display. We're happy to brief the House.
No. 2 quick things. Okay, number one, because we have to go, because we got to brief the House, and if we don't and they're pissed at us, you guys better defend us. That was because we were talking to you. I'll make one more point, and it's a very interesting point. One of those ships that was seized that had oil in the Caribbean, you know what the interim authorities are asking for in Venezuela? They want that oil that was seized to be part of this deal. They understand that the only way they can move oil and generate revenue and not have economic collapse is if they cooperate and work with the United States, and that's what we see are going to happen. We got to go talk to the House, guys. I apologize.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic following a weeks-long pursuit. A second tanker was seized in the Caribbean. President Trump says the U.S. will receive up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil. Plus, why Nicolas Maduro's capture is raising questions about Chinese-made air defense systems. National security concerns in the Arctic in the spotlight. The White House press secretary says using the U.S. military is on the table to deter adversaries in the Arctic region. The federal government is moving to claw back millions in taxpayer dollars from what it calls widespread Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. One official says it's just the tip of the iceberg. Los Angeles residents look back on the wildfires that scorched LA County a year ago. Many still coping with the aftermath of the disaster.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Stephanie Cox. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic. The Justice Department announced the seizure of the Bella 1 for violations of U.S. sanctions. The move follows a weeks-long pursuit starting near Venezuela last month. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed the news on X, writing, quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world." The vessel was previously known as the Bella One and has been renamed the Marinera. It's on the U.S. sanctions list for evading oil restrictions tied to Venezuela. The Department of Homeland Security led the operation with military support. U.S. law enforcement officials are now aboard that ship. There were no reports of shots fired during the boarding. The seizure comes after the tanker was tracked near Scotland, drawing criticism from Moscow, which says the vessel was operating in international waters under Russian law. The U.S. has also seized 2 other sanctioned tankers near Venezuela in recent weeks as part of its blockade of illicit oil shipments. And in a separate operation, the U.S. Southern Command said it captured a second Venezuela-linked tanker in the Caribbean Sea. In a social media post, Southern Command said the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless, sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The vessel is known as the Sophia. Southern Command said it was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting the ship to the U.S. And more developments from Venezuela. President Trump announced yesterday the U.S. will soon receive 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil in the near future. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus a look at how Chinese defense systems in Venezuela failed to impress.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the oil the U.S. receives from Venezuela will be sold at market price and that money will be controlled by him as President of the United States. Trump says he will ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The transfer could be worth nearly $3 billion, with oil trading at roughly $56 a barrel. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum discusses utilizing oil from Venezuela, speaking on Fox News.
You need to dilute that heavy crude with a lighter product. And of course, we have an excess of that lighter product here because the shale oils that come out of the shale revolution in America are perfect for blending. It's great news for jobs. It's great news for gas prices going forward. It's great news for America, and it's great news for Venezuela.
Burgum says Venezuela has an opportunity now to have capital come in and rebuild their economy.
They have larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world. Venezuela, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, pushed back on UN criticism of the Maduro operation, speaking on Fox News.
I don't know why they're so upset. As I pointed out at the Security Council, over 50 countries didn't even recognize Maduro because he stole the election. So it's hard to figure out what they're so upset about. Well, I think we know the answer. It's because it's President Trump, and he's a man of action and took real action.
Waltz says the Venezuelan people are going to be better off.
And look, at the end of the day, this was the right thing to do. President Trump took bold action and will continue to swing and doge that ridiculous organization called the United Nations.
The lightning operation to capture Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, punched in and out of Caracas before its air defenses could mount an effective response. The raid raised uncomfortable questions for China about the limits of the Chinese-supplied systems that Venezuela has leaned on, especially anti-stealth radar that China advertised as capable of spotting and stopping U.S. stealth aircraft. Analyst Yu Tsung-chi, a retired major general from Taiwan, says the operation suggested deeper weaknesses, corruption in China's defense industry, and a lack of reliability of the technology and command structure meant to tie those systems together. Yu described it as a system built to look modern on paper and intimidating in propaganda, but falls apart under the demands of real combat. Yu says neither Chinese or Russian air defense systems made the slightest bit of difference once the U.S. brought real-time intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision weapons to bear. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks to Daniel for that report. The State Department has expanded its list of nations whose citizens will be subject to visa bonds of up to $15,000 to enter the United States. It has added 25 more nations. The latest additions will bring it to 38. The newly added countries include Algeria, Cuba, Nepal, Nigeria, Venezuela, and others. B1 and B2 visas are used for short-term business and tourism travel. Citizens of those nations who are eligible are required to post a bond ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, with the amount being determined during the visa interview. The list of nations stems from a 12-month visa bond pilot program the department launched in August last year. It targeted countries with high visa overstay rates, insufficient screening and vetting, or those that offer citizenship to individuals via investment. Next, Warner Brothers Discovery has rejected Paramount's latest takeover bid. The media giant told shareholders to stick with a competing offer from Netflix. Warner Brothers leadership has repeatedly rebuffed Paramount's bids. The company has urged shareholders to back the sale of its streaming and studio business for Netflix for $72 billion. Warner Brothers Discovery said today that its board determined Paramount's offer is not in the best interests of the company or its shareholders. Paramount has offered $77.9 billion for the entire company and gone straight to shareholders with a hostile bid. Last month, Paramount added a guarantee from Oracle founder Larry Ellison to back $40.4 billion in equity financing for the company's offer. Larry Ellison is the father of Paramount CEO David Ellison. Paramount also increased its promised payout to shareholders to $5.8 billion if the deal is blocked by regulators. Still to come, President Trump wants Greenland. We take a look at his reasons, his options, and reactions with a geopolitical analyst after this.
With Select Specs £6 specs, you can get 10 pairs of prescription glasses for just £60. That includes frames, prescription lenses, and delivery free to your door. And what makes this really special is each pair can have a different prescription. So it's glasses for everyone. SelectSpecs.com/£6. 10 frames, all with prescription lenses and anti-scratch coating for just £60. You don't get that on the high street. Right now you can save an extra 5% with offer code CG5OFF.
All throughout your home, appliances and systems just wait for the worst time to break down and leave you with expensive repairs. Unless you have a plan from Choice Home Warranty.
All home appliances and systems have a breakdown clock, and when it expires, it will cost hundreds and potentially even thousands of dollars to fix or replace. That's why every homeowner should have a plan with Choice Home Warranty, like I do. For a low monthly fee, a Choice Home Warranty plan will cover your heating, air conditioning, plumbing, appliances, and more. Don't let an unexpected repair wreck your budget. With Choice Home Warranty, that covered repair is fixed or replaced for you.
Choice Home Warranty has been a great company to work with, and they've taken care of us. I would suggest anybody who lives in a home not to be in a home without him.
Avoid the ticking clock of home appliances and systems breaking down with a plan from Choice Home Warranty. Call now to get your first month free. Call in the next 10 minutes and we'll give you $120 off your first year of coverage. That's $200 in total savings.
With a nationwide network of over 25,000 technicians, I don't worry about how my next breakdown will be handled. With a click of a button, my claim is filed, and Choice Home Warranty starts the clock. They do the legwork, hiring the right technician and handling the cost of covered repairs and replacements. And check this out. For a limited time, you can get 1 month of coverage free. Did you hear me? Free. You can't beat that deal with a sledgehammer. But hurry, this offer is ticking away. Once the clock hits zero, poof, it's gone.
Don't fear the breakdown clock. Get a plan from Choice Home Warranty and get round-the-clock money-saving protection you can count on. Call in the next 10 minutes and we'll give you $120 off your first year of coverage, plus get your first month free. This offer won't last long.
Get your home protected. Call now.
Don't wait for an appliance or system to break down. Call before that happens. Call 800-983-3523. 800-983-3523.
I've stayed hidden for decades, but I had to come back because they started selling Folicious at Walmart.
This isn't your average soup. It's made with real beef tallow and fresh spices. They think I survive on berries and bark, but this is real pho with real broth, and I'm never going back. They followed the smell of the pho. I gotta move. If they find this stash, it's over. Folicious. Restaurant quality, anywhere.
President Trump sending a message to the NATO alliance today. Trump says he made the alliance stronger, adding that the U.S. will always stand behind NATO. Trump emphasized that he got member nations to commit to spending 5% of their GDP on defense. According to the old agreement, member nations had to spend 2% on defense. Trump wrote, quote, "Everyone said that couldn't be done, but it could, because beyond all else, they're all my friends." Trump added, "We will always be there for NATO, even if they won't be there for us. The U.S., the only nation that China and Russia fear and respect, is the Donald J. Trump rebuilt USA," he said. The message comes after Trump discussed expanding U.S. influence in Greenland in recent days, which has received pushback from several NATO allies. And Ukraine is seeking a clear answer from its partners on what their response would be in the case of a future Russian attack. This just one day after more than 30 countries, including the U.S., met in Paris to finalize security guarantees for Ukraine.
If there is aggression again, will all partners give a strong response to the Russians? I'm asking this very question to all our partners, and I haven't received a clear, unambiguous answer yet.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he sees that partners are willing to provide strong security guarantees, but he added that the guarantees have to be legally binding, supported by the nation's parliaments and the U.S. Congress. He also said the American side has been productive in achieving real results, but according to Zelensky, more is needed. He told reporters he hoped to meet President Trump soon, possibly in Washington, to discuss U.S. security guarantees. The U.S., for the first time, backed a coalition of Ukraine's allies in vowing to provide security guarantees. The agreement followed a coalition of the willing summit in Paris yesterday, as you've been hearing.
The United States, for the first time on Tuesday, backed a broad coalition of Ukraine's allies in vowing to provide security guarantees that leaders said would include binding commitments to support the country if it is attacked by Russia again. The pledge came at a summit in Paris of the so-called Coalition of the Willing to firm up security guarantees to reassure Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said after the summit that President Donald Trump, quote, strongly stands behind security protocols.
Those security protocols are meant to, A, deter any attacks, any further attacks in Ukraine, and B, if there are any attacks, they're meant to defend, and they will do both.
A statement by coalition leaders also said that allies will participate in a proposed U.S.-led ceasefire monitoring and verification mechanism. Talks to bring the almost 4-year conflict to an end have accelerated since November. Until recently, much of the focus was on pledges of military aid for Ukraine's forces and possible contributions to an international reassurance force. But attention has now shifted to legally binding guarantees to come to Kyiv's aid in the event of another attack by Moscow. Kyiv has long said it cannot be safe without guarantees that are comparable to NATO's mutual defense agreement to deter Russia from attacking again. Moscow wants any peace deal to bar Ukraine from military alliances.
A national security priority for the Trump administration is to acquire Greenland. The White House press secretary yesterday emphasized that it's vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region. Earlier this morning, I spoke with NTD's Melina Wisecup about the discussion over acquiring Greenland. Take a look. Good to see you, Melina. The discussion over acquiring Greenland has actually been going on since Trump took office. What's the latest development?
Good morning, Steph. So mainly the White House is now just highlighting how serious the president is about this and directly saying that this is such an important goal that the use of the U.S. military is on the table. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, told the Epoch Times yesterday, like you mentioned, that Greenland is vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region and that the president and his team are now discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal. Utilizing the U.S. military is always an option, she said. In response, Nordic countries released a joint statement emphasizing that decisions in regard to Denmark and Greenland belong to the two of them. But they also noted increases in Arctic security investments. The foreign minister said they're ready to discuss with the U.S. ways to enhance security. The U.S. already has a military presence in both Denmark and Greenland. The U.S. Department of Defense operates the Patuxent Space Base in northwestern Greenland. That was built following an agreement in 1951. That space base supports missile warning, missile defense, and space surveillance. Now, you also have on Denmark's mainland, the Denmark Parliament last year actually voted to allow U.S. military bases to operate on Danish soil. Now, this is also building on a military agreement made between the two nations under the Biden administration, Steph. So this has been going on for quite some time, but now it's just looking like the administration is getting more serious about it.
So, Melina, remind us, what are the national security issues that the White House is concerned about?
Right. So the Arctic is coming more into the spotlight right now, especially because we see China and Russia eyeing control of the area. The U.S. has expanded ties with Greenland to counteract Russia and China's actions, for example, like Beijing's Polar Silk Road initiative. Now, many also highlight that Greenland has minerals which could help the U.S. reduce dependence on China for key rare earth minerals. But Steph, Trump previously stated that minerals are less of the equation here. He said, we need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. He said, quote, if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. That's what he said just on December 22nd. So he said we need it for national security and said we have to have it. In response to questions about if Trump plans to buy Greenland, a State Department spokesperson yesterday told the Epoch Times that the U.S. wants to build lasting commercial relationships, stating our common adversaries have been increasingly active in the Arctic. Steph.
Russia and China in sharp focus for the Trump administration, not just in that region or in their own countries, but in many places around the world for national security. Thank you so much, Melina Weisskopf. Good to speak with you. And House Speaker Mike Johnson this morning told reporters that he doesn't expect the use of military force in Greenland. Here's the Speaker.
I don't think anybody's talking about using military force in Greenland. They're looking at diplomatic channels and all.
The White House said they're keeping military options there open.
The U.S. always has military options for everything. I think it's a general statement. I think with Greenland, it's very clear that we are working on their diplomatic channels. My own governor of my state, Louisiana, has been appointed to that for that role, an emissary, and we expect a productive outcome of that.
I think it's not against Greenland's interests. There's a lot of thoughtful discussion to be had there, and that's what we expect is going to happen. So all this stuff about military action and all that, I don't think it's I don't even think that's a possibility. I don't think anybody's seriously considering that, and in the Congress, we're certainly not.
Joining us now to discuss Greenland and President Trump's recent doubling down on its importance to U.S. national security is geopolitical analyst Rod Dean Martin. Good to have you with us today, Rod, and speaking with you on a whole entirely new topic for the two of us. President Trump going in hard there. It did seem for a little while like the administration was saying military use is possible, but there we just heard the speaker saying it's not likely or potentially even possible. I'm assuming he means legal. What's your sense of what's legal here and what's likely?
Well, one of the benefits of Donald Trump is that he is very explicit that all options always exist. That doesn't mean that we're going to use all options, for goodness sake. It just means they exist. And it keeps people off balance and it focuses them in negotiation. We spent about a quarter century, if not more, under the illusion that it was our responsibility to telegraph to the world literally every single thing we were going to do. So they knew years before we acted what our limits were, what our boundaries were. It makes it impossible to negotiate a good deal. Trump never, ever does that. He always comes out with these maximal approaches that put people in a frame of mind to try to negotiate the best deal they can. And we end up with the best deal for Donald Trump. So that's what's happening here. And honestly, in Greenland, the solution isn't even a U.S. annexation through a purchase. The best possible outcome looks like Palau and the Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia, where they are independent, sovereign countries. but they have a free association compact with the United States. They get all the benefits of sovereignty and none of the expenses. And that solves everybody's problem, honestly, including Denmark's, because Greenland is a money pit for Denmark and they're not able to develop it.
And we heard President Trump speaking about the numerous Chinese and Russian ships circling Greenland. According to him, some critics have pushed back on that. What's your sense of how true that is and how much of a risk that is to the U.S.?
Well, the critics are just willfully blind. This is a reality, and it comes from the widespread belief that global warming is going to result in an ice-free Arctic. Now, whether or not you believe that's true, if it is true, Greenland becomes essential real estate from a trade route perspective because it is vastly shorter and vastly cheaper to ship around the world by going through the Arctic. Now, even if global warming never happens and we plunge into an ice age, we're moving into an era of increased emphasis on nuclear power. Nuclear power gives you some options with regard to icebreakers that you wouldn't normally have, and the Soviets pioneered this during the Cold War. No question the Chinese are going to do the same, and we could too. So either way you cut it, you end up with Greenland being important for trade, important for defense, and essential, actually, as we try to diversify away from Chinese rare earths and from foreign sources of oil as well. There's a tremendous amount of energy in Greenland, once again, that Denmark is unable to exploit, and it would make every Greenlander crazy rich.
Now, President Trump, we just heard, was reinforcing his role in uniting and strengthening NATO, perhaps in response to some of the European caution around the recent talk about Greenland and potential military use, all the options being on the table. What's your sense of what would happen to the alliance if we were to see the U.S. potentially using force in Greenland or in other ways taking control?
Honestly, I think we would get about 31 strongly worded letters. I don't think any of these people have the slightest intention of getting rid of their sugar daddy. The United States pays 70.5% of the costs of the defense of NATO. That's 70.5% from one country in a 32-nation alliance. And there's no getting around this. The only way out of that is exactly what Donald Trump has been pushing our NATO allies to do, which is stand up real militaries, to go to 5% of GDP defense expenditures for every ally so that they are actual partners, not dependents. And this is a bargaining chip in that. He's not going to invade Greenland. But if they have to worry about it, they actually have some incentive to do what they've already committed to do and improve their militaries and make their partnership with us closer and more integral. This is a win-win for everybody. And honestly, if Greenland ended up in a more U.S.-centric orbit, ideally through that free association compact model that we see with 3 different Pacific countries who've already done this, everybody wins. And nobody wins more than the Greenlanders, but the Danes win, and the United States absolutely does.
And Leslie, let's just take a quick look at the Danish claim to Greenland.
Well, the Danish claim to Greenland is kind of interesting and fraught. And the part that we just magically gloss over here is that a bunch of people who are highly opposed to imperialism and European colonialism are actually maintaining in Greenland a European colony. So all the people talking about decolonization are just ignoring that little detail. And the truth of the matter is that Greenlanders overwhelmingly support independence. They haven't voted for it yet, although they have voted for the precursors to it, probably because they realize that 57,000 people can't afford the costs of being an independent state. They can't give up the $1 billion a year they get in subsidy from Denmark. They can't afford a defense. They can barely afford a police force, and they certainly can't afford to put embassies all over the world. This is exactly where the Free Association Compact idea really, really resonates. It gives them all the benefits of independence with none of the costs. But Trump isn't going to talk about that in the short term. In the short term, he's going to throw out these maximal ideas and freak everybody out very deliberately, and then they start being creative and negotiating toward where he really wants to end up. And again, if you've been reading Donald Trump since he wrote Art of the Deal in 87, Surviving at the Top in 90, Art of the Comeback in 97, had The Apprentice on TV for 15 years. If you've been paying attention, this is how he always negotiates everything, and he usually wins.
It certainly is a different playbook. Thank you so much for your time today. Watching it all closely, Rod Martin. Appreciate it.
And you.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth held a closed classified briefing today on Venezuela for the full U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. Rubio told reporters that he will meet with Denmark next week regarding Denmark. Take a listen.
Why is the administration not taking Denmark's offer to discuss the situation in Greenland? And
I'll be meeting with them next week.
But will you take military intervention off the table?
I'm not here to talk about Denmark or military intervention. I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. And but I'm not having anything further to add to that today. Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term. What I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means.
Iran is facing growing unrest as nationwide protests entered their 11th day there, with demonstrators issuing a direct appeal to President Trump. Human rights groups report at least 36 people killed and more than 1,200 arrested. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with the Persian Epoch Times about what makes these protests unique in comparison with past movements.
An opposition group says demonstrators have effectively taken control of two western cities, Abdanan and Malek-Shahi, with crowds celebrating in the streets and chanting slogans against Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Protests and strikes have now spread to dozens of cities across the country. In Alam province, witnesses report tear gas was fired inside a hospital as authorities tried to arrest wounded protesters. Images circulating on social media show a woman holding a sign making a direct appeal to President Trump, saying, "Please don't let them kill us." President Trump earlier issued a warning to the regime.
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
Persian Epoch Times publisher Shahrzad Ghaneh says the regime is listening.
Inside Iran, the leadership takes any direct threat from Donald Trump and his administration very seriously. Even if they publicly they show that they are dismissing it, but they remember that Trump has acted very unpredictably before.
Ghaneh says Trump's words signal to Iranians that Washington is paying attention.
This really matters to Iranian people, that they're feeling that this time they have this support from the U.S. administration. So for protesters, the message is offering psychological reassurance to the people. And they're feeling they're not completely invisible.
Ghaneh says these protests are unique in several ways. One key difference is the participation of merchants in Tehran's historic Grand Bazaar, a group that has traditionally stayed out of political unrest.
Usually they wouldn't intervene much. They're considered one of the most conservative groups in Iran. And the bazaar is the biggest center for the trade in Iran.
Another major difference from past uprisings, she says, is growing public support for the exiled crown prince.
You can see it everywhere, especially among young Iranian people that they're chanting his name.
The Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, has said he is willing to lead a transition until a referendum is held. He speaks optimistically on Fox News.
In all these years, I've never seen an opportunity as we see today in Iran.
Ghanay says signs of dissent are also emerging from within establishment circles.
A very interesting thing is happening is the hashtag saying Khamenei is not my leader. It's going viral.
She adds that Trump administration sanctions have deepened economic pressure on the regime.
They're not giving the money into the country like Biden and Obama administration. They were giving the Islamic Republic money.
Apart from basic needs like water, electric, and food, Ghanay says Iranians want their dignity back.
They are peaceful people, and they know that Islamic Republic is not representing what type of people they are. You know, if you go, Iranian people are considered as very kind people. I would say kindest people in the world. Their hospitality is very famous among the tourists that go inside the Iran. But their image is not representing who they are, right? In the news. So making Iran great again, they want to give back all these things.
In recent days, the U.S. has transported 12 military aircraft to 2 bases in the U.K., leading to speculation about their possible deployment in the event of any Iran engagement. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. Tokyo today said China's ban on dual-use exports targeting Japan is unacceptable. This occurs amid increasing tensions between the two major Asian economies. Here's more.
Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary, Minoru Kihara, said Wednesday that China's export ban on dual-use items was, quote, absolutely unacceptable and deeply regrettable. A dual-use item describes goods or software that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. The term often includes rare earth elements needed for making drones, computer chips, and other devices. Kihara declined to say which industries could be impacted, saying it remained unclear exactly what items would be targeted. China's ban was announced Tuesday and is its latest move in response to Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. Late last year, she said a Chinese attack on the democratically governed island could pose an existential threat to Japan. Beijing, which claims Taiwan as its territory, demanded she retract the remarks, something she has refused to do. Meanwhile, Chinese media reported that Beijing is considering tightening reviews of rare earth export licenses to Japan more broadly. Analysts warn this could have far-reaching consequences for Japan's manufacturing sector, especially automakers. Despite efforts to diversify supplies since China last curbed rare earth exports in 2010, about 60% of Japan's imports still come from China. Economists estimate a 3-month disruption could cost Japanese businesses around $4.2 billion. For now, customs data shows no signs of decline, with Chinese rare earth exports to Japan at a 1-year high in November.
Coming up, a massive fraud scheme took center stage on Capitol Hill today. Lawmakers held their first public hearing with a witness alleging retaliation against whistleblowers. And Los Angeles residents look back on the wildfires that scorched LA County 1 year ago. Many continue to cope with the aftermath of that disaster.
Buying or selling a home has gotten hard. Inventory is tight and interest rates are high. Making a move can be scary. That's why who you work with matters. I partner with HomeLight to help our clients win in any situation. Our buyers find great deals on their dream homes, and our sellers get top dollar even in a challenging market. HomeLight gives our clients the edge they need, and together, we all win.
So at the age of 5, I was sexually molested. I had my first child at the age of 15 and became homeless at the age of 16. The scariest part about not having a place to live was having a child and not having a place to live and not knowing where our meal was going to come from and where we're going to sleep. To be homeless as a teen, I didn't ask for that.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or a warm meal to eat, or whether anyone cares about them. 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year, and that's unacceptable. But the good news is there is an organization making a big difference, Covenant House.
Call or go online now. For a gift of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis.
It was pretty tough. But Covenant House really helped me and really helped mold me into the woman I am today.
Call or go online right now to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month. With your monthly donation, you'll receive this soft, comforting blanket as a reminder of the warmth and safety your gift will provide a young person tonight.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life. They gave me the love that I needed. They just really genuinely just wanted to help me succeed, and I'm succeeding.
Your $19 monthly gift is urgently needed to reach other young people who are facing unimaginable situations. Call or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
Your support makes the work of Covenant House possible. Thank you for caring.
Now's the time to save during the annual clearance event at Mathis Home. We have over 100 dining sets in stock with the styles you'll love. Values like this are hard to find. Take your pick. These modern dining sets are just $3.99. This one features a wood grain finish and 4 upholstered side chairs. This set has a durable faux marble top and 4 side chairs. Your choice, just $3.99 with fast, free delivery. Come save with the annual clearance event at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
Welcome back. The Trump administration announced a new slate of dietary guidelines today. It recommends Americans eat more protein and less sugar than previously advised, and that consumers avoid highly processed foods to achieve a healthy diet. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt briefed reporters earlier. She was joined by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Take a listen.
These new guidelines are informed by the best and most reliable research on health and nutrition, particularly as it relates to the role of our diets in the prevalence of chronic disease in the country. They are also These guidelines are easy to read and understand, so every American, young and old, can access this information that literally has the power to change lives. But these are not just an updated guideline. These are the foundation to all federal food programs in our country.
Eat real food. This is the main message of the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, which encourage households and schools to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods. That means more protein, more dairy, more healthy fats, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, whether they are fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. We are finally putting real food back at the center of the American diet. Real food that nourishes the body, restores health, fuels energy, and builds strength.
The guidelines are the latest step in the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda. Kennedy and Rollins had promised to simplify the guidelines. They also pledged to remove what they called undue influence from food companies. The guidelines are issued every 5 years. They're published by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture. The new version includes changes promised by Kennedy. It strongly discourages eating highly processed foods, as we mentioned, and it warns against adding sugar. Kennedy has linked high sugar and processed food consumption to chronic disease in the U.S. Other recommendations remain unchanged. These include prioritizing fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. They also keep the cap on saturated fat at 10% of daily calories. Georgia is set to hold a special election on March 10th to replace former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Greene resigned on Monday. In letters to Governor Brian Kemp and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, she wrote, quote, "It has been my honor and privilege to serve the people of Georgia's 14th congressional district." Now voters will choose who gets to finish her term. Greene's district, northwest of Atlanta, is considered a Republican stronghold. And Texas agriculture officials are again warning residents about unsolicited seed packages being mailed from China. The Texas Department of Agriculture says more than 1,100 mystery seed packages have been collected since February of last year, and they were sent to over 100 locations statewide. The most recent package was recovered on December 29th. Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller says the seeds pose a potential threat to crops, ecosystems, and the food supply. Officials say similar mailings have been reported in several other states, making it a nationwide concern. Investigators say the seeds are sacred lotus, an invasive aquatic plant when introduced outside its native range. Texans who receive suspicious packages are urged not to open, plant, or throw those packages away, and instead to contact the Texas Department of Agriculture for proper handling instructions. The trial of one of the first police officers on the scene of the 2022 Uvalde school shooting opened yesterday. Prosecutors accused him of criminally failing to try to stop the slaughter, while the defense said the officer did the best he could at the chaotic and confusing scene. Here are the details.
One of the first police officers on the scene of the mass shooting at a Texas elementary school in 2022 is now the first to stand trial. Former Uvalde School District Police Officer Adrian Gonzalez was charged in 2024 with 29 counts of child endangerment. According to the indictment, he, quote, failed to engage, distract, and delay the shooter. It also said that he failed, quote, to follow his active shooter training to respond to gunfire by advancing toward the gunfire. Special Prosecutor Bill Turner told the jury that within seconds of arriving at the school, a teacher informed Gonzalez where the gunman was.
She says, he's over there. She urges him to go get him. Adrian Gonzalez says, where? Over there. He's wearing black. He's in the teacher's parking lot. As shots are ringing out. This is not confusion. He gets on the radio and says, shots are fired. He's wearing black. He's in the parking lot. He knows where he is. But Adrian Gonzalez remains at the south side of the school.
The gunman first crashed his car into a culvert near the school and fired on a funeral parlor across the street. Gonzalez's attorney, Nico Lahoud, said his client did not understand the gunman was intent on killing students. He said Gonzalez rather thought he was trying to escape the scene of the crash and funeral parlor shooting.
This is what Adrian did. I mean, the government wants to make it seem like he just sat there, you know. He didn't just sit there. He did what he could with what he knew at the time, and this was fluid and it was a dynamic situation.
19 students and 2 teachers were killed in the attack. The 376 officers who responded to the Robb Elementary shooting have faced sharp criticism for waiting 77 minutes before confronting the gunman. State and federal investigations found that officers left the 18-year-old shooter alone inside a classroom with children while weighing how to confront him. By the time a tactical team led by Border Patrol officers stormed in, the toll had reached among the worst in U.S. history.
One of the most notorious spies in U.S. history has died at the age of 84. U.S. Bureau of Prisons says Aldrich Ames died in custody on Monday. A Maryland medical examiner will determine the cause of death. The former CIA case officer was arrested by the FBI in 1994 and sentenced to life in prison for espionage against the U.S. He was responsible for the arrest and eventual execution of numerous Soviet and Russian officials secretly working on behalf of the U.S. intelligence community as double agents. Ames joined the CIA in 1962 as a low-level document analyst. He rose through the ranks up to the case officer rank and specialized in targeting the Soviet Union. According to his guilty plea agreement, Ames went to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1985 and volunteered to spy against the U.S. It's estimated Ames received about $2.5 million from Russia and the Soviet Union for his years of spying. And it's been 1 year since devastating wildfires burned through Los Angeles. Today, communities are still coping with the aftermath of that disaster. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more as locals look back on that tragedy.
1 year ago, a blaze tore through LA's Pacific Palisades neighborhood. Another scorched the town of Altadena, northeast of Los Angeles. Pacific Palisades resident Perry Richards remembers how quickly the disaster unfolded.
Unbelievable, right? Well, as you know, January 7th was a day that we'll never forget. One spark turned into a full-blown catastrophic event on January 7th.
The two fires that broke out on January 7th, 2025 killed more than 30 people in Los Angeles County. Over 17,000 homes and buildings were leveled. Richard stayed behind to save what he could of his home.
So I pull up my garden hose, no mask, no goggles or anything, and I just started watering down for about 45 minutes.
His cliffside home remains uninhabitable, but he's hopeful he'll be able to return.
It's a miracle that this house still stands. Hopefully it's a beacon of hope that we're going to move back here and we're going to help reestablish what we left and what we lost and try to recreate the wonderful community of the Palisades.
Across the street, John Emerson's home was completely destroyed. He said the community was on its own when the fires broke out.
There were no fire department here. It was just homeowners that had managed to get in to, either try to save their home or just to find out what happened.
The fixed income retiree is considering his family's future. He says the city should have done more.
We didn't sign up for this at all, and so I'm still pretty mad about it in terms of the city's responsibility.
Richards expressed similar feelings.
The emotion of it all is, we just feel abandoned, I think, at the end of the day.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Breaking news, a federal law enforcement shooting was reported this morning in South Minneapolis. In a statement moments ago, the city of Minneapolis asked residents to stay away from the scene because of a shooting, quote, involving federal law enforcement. U.S. Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bavina was present at the scene. City Council Vice President Jamal Osman said the woman who was shot was a civilian. He said she was shot while inside a vehicle. Governor Tim Walz said his team is being briefed and asked the public to remain calm. Mayor Jacob Frey said the shooting involved an ICE agent. We'll keep you updated as the situation develops. Next, the 2026 Consumer Electronics Show is underway in Las Vegas with companies from around the world unveiling their latest technology. NTD's Christina Corona takes us to the Samsung show floor for a closer look at what's new.
We're here in the city of Las Vegas at CES 2026, where the latest tech is on display. From new gadgets to cutting-edge innovation, we'll be walking the show floor and showing you what stands out this year. At the Samsung show floor, we got a hands-on experience with the latest Samsung Galaxy Z Trifold.
This is a fully functioning phone on the outside with a 6.5-inch dynamic AMOLED display, but then when you want to take it to the next level, you don't just fold it once, you fold it twice, and now you have a 10-inch dynamic AMOLED 2X display on the inside.
He says multitasking is taken to a whole new level by allowing users to run several apps at once on the expanded screen.
Maybe I wanted to go ahead and do things like take notes, but then drag and drop photos into my notes. I can do that natively. You can actually run 3 different apps side by side on the inside display of this.
Samsung is also showcasing its newest AI-powered televisions for 2026, including an AI Soccer Mode Pro designed to enhance the viewing experience for soccer fans worldwide. Viewers can customize game audio by lowering crowd noise or boosting the commentary, getting information on individual players, and even pull up real-time stats and AI predictions on who's likely to win the match, all by just speaking to your TV. Samsung is also showing off a transparent micro LED screen, giving a glimpse at where screen technology is headed. Because the screen is brighter, more light passes through each pixel, making it clearer to see what's behind it. Samsung is also debuting an AI-powered beauty mirror that analyzes skin conditions like wrinkles and pigmentation, then offers personalized skincare recommendations. The mirror doubles as a smart display, blending beauty tech with next-generation screen technology. The These products show how Samsung is blending everyday technology with smarter, more personalized experiences.
Reporting from the Samsung show floor right next to the transparent micro LEDs, Christina Corona, NTD News, Las Vegas.
And thanks to Christina for that report. That's all we have time for this hour. But if you have any feedback on our show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'll cover more news right after this break.
All throughout your home, appliances and systems just wait for the worst time to break down and leave you with expensive repairs. Unless you have a plan from Choice Home Warranty.
All home appliances and systems have a breakdown clock, and when it expires, it will cost hundreds and potentially even thousands of dollars to fix or replace. That's why every homeowner should have a plan with Choice Home Warranty, like I do. For a low monthly fee, a Choice Home Warranty plan will cover your heating, air conditioning, plumbing, appliances, and more. Don't let an unexpected repair wreck your budget. With Choice Home Warranty, that covered repair is fixed or replaced for you.
Choice Home Warranty has been a great company to work with, and they've taken care of us. I would suggest anybody who lives in a home not to be in a home without them.
Avoid the ticking clock of home appliances and systems breaking down with a plan from Choice Home Warranty. Call now to get your first month free. Call in the next 10 minutes and we'll give you $120 off your first year of coverage. That's $200 in total savings.
With a nationwide network of over 25,000 technicians, I don't worry about how my next breakdown will be handled. With a click of a button, my claim is filed and Choice Home Warranty starts the clock. They do the legwork, hiring the right technician and handling the cost of covered repairs and replacements. And check this out. For a limited time, you can get 1 month of coverage free. Did you hear me? Free. You can't beat that deal with a sledgehammer. But hurry, this offer is ticking away. Once the clock hits zero, poof, it's gone.
Don't fear the breakdown clock. Get a plan from Choice Home Warranty and get round-the-clock money-saving protection you can count on. Call in the next 10 minutes and we'll give you $120 off your first year of coverage, plus get your first month free. This offer won't last long.
Get your home protected. Call now.
Don't wait for an appliance or system to break down. Call before that happens. Call 800-983-3523. 800-983-3523.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
What's happened to this world we're living in? Why?
For the 4 years he has been on this earth, he has known nothing but war.
Wherever I go, the things I see, I just want to turn away. The dreams I have, the stories I could tell, will they still be possible? This year, more than ever, I need a brand new world, a clean world. Where I can improve myself and be inspired. My stage can be anywhere and everywhere, but it begins here.
Ganjing World. A brighter way of life.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic following a weeks-long pursuit. A second tanker was seized in the Caribbean. President Trump says the U.S. will receive up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil, plus why Nicolas Maduro's capture is raising questions about Chinese-made air defense systems. National security concerns in the Arctic in the spotlight. The White House press secretary says using the U.S. military is on the table to deter adversaries in the Arctic region. And coming up, a massive fraud scheme took center stage on Capitol Hill today. Lawmakers held their first public hearing with a witness alleging retaliation against whistleblowers.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Victoria White. The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic. The Justice Department announced the seizure of the Bella 1 for violations of U.S. sanctions. The move follows a weeks-long pursuit starting near Venezuela last month. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed the news on X, writing, quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world." The vessel was previously known as a Bella 1 and has been renamed the Marinera. It's on the U.S. sanctions list for evading oil restrictions tied to Venezuela. The Department of Homeland Security led the operation with military support. U.S. law enforcement officials are now aboard the ship. There were no reports of shots fired during the boarding. The seizure comes after the tanker was tracked near Scotland, drawing criticism from Moscow, which says the vessel was operating in international waters under Russian law. The U.S. has also seized 2 other sanctioned tankers near Venezuela in recent weeks as part of its blockade of illicit oil shipments. In a separate operation, the U.S. Southern Command said it captured a second Venezuela-linked tanker in the Caribbean Sea. In a social media post, Southern Command said the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless, sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The vessel is known as the Sophia. Southern Command says it was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting the ship to the U.S. And more developments from Venezuela. President Trump announced yesterday the U.S. will soon receive 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil in the near future. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus a look at how Chinese defense systems in Venezuela failed to impress.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the oil the U.S. receives from Venezuela will be sold at market price and that money will be controlled by him as President of the United States. Trump says he will ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The transfer could be worth nearly $3 billion, with oil trading at roughly $56 a barrel. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum discusses utilizing oil from Venezuela, speaking on Fox News.
You need to dilute that heavy crude with a lighter product. And of course, we have an excess of that lighter product here because the shale oils that come out of the shale revolution in America are perfect for blending. It's great news for jobs. It's great news for gas prices going forward. It's great news for America, and it's great news for Venezuela.
Burgum says Venezuela has an opportunity now to have capital come in and rebuild their economy.
They have larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world. Venezuela, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, pushed back on UN criticism of the Maduro operation, speaking on Fox News.
I don't know why they're so upset. As I pointed out at the Security Council, over 50 countries didn't even recognize Maduro because he stole the election. So it's hard to figure out what they're so upset about. Well, I think we know the answer. It's because it's President Trump, and he's a man of action.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem is now holding a press conference in Brownsville, Texas. Let's tune in.
We're a nation of borders. We recognize, and President Trump recognizes, that a nation with no borders is no nation at all, and our laws need to be enforced. And that is a dramatic change, especially in this part of America down here at the southern border from what the Biden administration was enforcing. They ignored our laws, allowed an invasion of dangerous criminals, known and suspected terrorists to come into our country, and every day while we work to remove them, we are still focused on making sure that this border barrier is safe and that these families here are secure. This morning I met with several local farmers and ranchers, talked to them about the dramatic change that has impacted their lives over the last year. Before President Trump was in office at the end of 2024, they had an invasion going on their property. Their crops were being destroyed. They couldn't go out and take care of their land because of security reasons. They were carrying weapons to protect their families and their property, and they hoped that someone would care enough to come and help secure not just their livelihoods, but also the land that had been in their family for generations. Today, they told a very different story. They told a story of land that had essentially been given back to them, that now they could go out there and check their crops, work the ground safely, not be in fear of danger. They could go out and walk up and down their roads without the concern of being run over by cartel members moving their loads of dope across the border and into the United States. And they also told the stories and the memories of the horrific encounters that they had to deal with in their own home communities because of what Joe Biden was doing to this country. Joe Biden invited chaos into America in the form of the 4-year border crisis that has been unprecedented and broke a lot of what makes America great. And President Trump has been focused on putting it back together and making sure that Americans know that they have a leader that believes in them and wants to give them a chance at the American dream. Those ranchers that I spoke with and those farmers that I spoke with this morning, they're all Americans that agree that our country needs to be safe and needs to be secure, and they're grateful for President Trump's leadership. In 2025, daily illegal alien apprehensions at the southwest border have dropped by 95%. And for almost 10 months in a row, nearly a year, the Border Patrol has released 0 illegal aliens into our country. That is a record-setting amount of time period that we have had. And we have also seen 2.6 million illegal aliens removed from the United States of America. That includes almost 700,000 that have been arrested and deported and brought to justice, and then almost 2 million that have left voluntarily, because we sent a very clear message to the world that if you are in the United States illegally, go home now. If you wait until we detain you and deport you, you will never get the chance to come back and be a part of the American dream. The American people have a lot to celebrate in this historic year, but we have a lot more work to do. Even the most historic success does not mean that we can rest on all of our laurels. Innovation and improvement is important, and that's why today we're announcing the next steps to secure our border. The Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Customs and Border Protection are deploying over 500 miles of border barrier in the form of water barriers like you see behind us. These barriers were funded in the One Big Beautiful Bill, and that is long enough to stretch all the way from Washington, D.C. to Nashville, Tennessee. It's more than 130 miles of those barriers are already under contract, and they're getting ready to be deployed starting today. These barriers consist of floating buoys that are 4 to 5 feet in diameter and up to 15 feet long. The buoys that you see here today behind me are ones that are made right in America by a family-owned company down the road here in Texas. CBP is working closely with our state of Texas and the U.S. International Boundary and Waters Commission to make sure that the buoy barriers are installed properly and that they are going to last for many, many years to come. These barriers will make it much harder for illegal aliens, to drug smugglers and human traffickers to cross the river and other waterways where they will be deployed. They'll create a safer environment for agents on patrol. And securing our waterways not only protects Americans, it saves the lives of illegal aliens by deterring them from daring to attempt to cross through this treacherous water. Under Joe Biden, nearly 3,000 illegal aliens died attempting to cross into the United States, and an untold number of individuals drowned. Water crossings are the second highest cause of death for aliens crossing the border, with heat exhaustion being number one. Things are so calm here now that it's easy to forget how bad things really were. In 2023, I want to remind you that the United Nations declared Biden's wide-open border barrier and border invasion the world's deadliest land migration route. Those barriers, and these ones behind me, are going to save our lives and going to save illegal alien lives. It will help stop the drug trafficking that's devastating our next generation of Americans, and it will also make sure that we're stopping the human trafficking that we've seen for so many years. Cartels now use drones to smuggle drugs as well, and other technology. We will continue to deploy technology to meet the challenges that we have in front of us. And as we continue to stop these smugglers, we're going to be working around the clock to stop the damage of the Biden administration. Joe Biden was complicit and culpable in the biggest child trafficking ring in all of human history. On his watch, more than 450,000 unaccompanied children were lost, or they were placed with unvetted sponsors at the southern border and were completely overwhelmed. So far, the Trump administration has found over 129,000 of these children, and we're going to continue to ramp up our efforts to make sure that every single one of them is accounted for, found, and returned to family and people who love them. President Trump's doing everything that he can to keep America safe. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank Chief Banks, the state of Texas, our Border Patrol, and all the individuals that are out there making sure that our border not only continues to be safe and secure, but that we also are out there deploying technology to make sure that all Americans get the chance to live in America where they can get up in the morning and be excited about raising their kids and their grandkids in a country that is free. And with that, I'll turn it back over to any questions that you may have. Yes, right here.
The border buoys, can you explain, they're a bit different than what Governor Abbott deployed. They don't have the metal in between. Tell us about the changes, why you made the changes. Is there more to it? How do they connect to the ground, and is there smart technology associated with it, ma'am?
Absolutely. I'm going to let Chief Banks describe the technology and the advancement in the buoy barriers, because he's worked extensively on the development of this device and with a company that will be under contract to provide many of these miles of barrier for us.
And so I believe what you're referring to in the barriers was the discs that were placed in between each of the barriers that the state of Texas put into place. Those discs were anti-tamper discs. What we did is, as we developed it out, we've created a way to create the same anti-deterrence or anti-tampering deterrence without having the disc in there. And so the system still works the same as far as how it sits on a ratchet system. As you try to climb up onto the buoys, they roll backwards, preventing you from being able to climb on. And then we've also found that using the more cylindrical instead of the circular, we get better flotation, which helps us maintain better control of the buoys. So what we've done is we've, over the last year, improved the buoy system that was being placed in the river in Texas, under the state of Texas, and worked with these. But they function the exact same way.
Yes.
Do you have any comment on what's happening with the shooting in Minneapolis? You didn't mention it earlier. I was wondering, out of the 2,000 deployed there, are they including the newly hired ICE agents, or are diversions still happening from FBI, Border Patrol, DEA, and HSI?
So a couple of questions there. You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened, it was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well. You've seen me in the last couple of days deploy over 2,000 more officers to the Minneapolis area. And in the last 2 days, we've arrested hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals, not just fraudsters who stole from the American people billions of dollars and put it in their pockets and enriched their friends from overseas and themselves, but also individuals who committed acts of murder and rape and trafficking and drug exploitation and child exploitation. So we're going to continue to do our work. And I want to remind everybody that the act like we saw today of using a vehicle to try to kill an officer and his colleagues and the other people around him is something that every politician, every elected official, everyone in this country should be able to rally around and say that it is wrong. And that sanctuary cities and sanctuary states that protect individuals who do that should no longer be allowed. That those individuals that are in leadership positions in these sanctuary jurisdictions need to work with us to make sure that every single person that's out there enforcing the law can be safe, but also so that all of our citizens can continue to be safe too. Domestic acts of terrorism like this will not stand, and I'm grateful that we have the leadership in Washington, D.C. that recognizes it, and will make sure that it's working to keep every single community safe, regardless of who's in charge in that city. President Trump gets up every day and will work to keep people safe, whether they're in a red state or a blue state or in a city that has a Republican mayor or a mayor that has a Democrat mayor. He's going to fight for every single American to make sure they live in a safe community and can raise their kids without fear. Yes.
Business owners across the Rio Grande Valley told me they're concerned about some of the sweeping ICE raids on work sites, particularly in construction, where sometimes workers with legal status are being kind of swept up in the process, delaying projects and hurting our economy. What is your message to these businesses?
Well, that's simply not happening. So it's just not true. We are focused on going after the worst of the worst in every community across this country to make sure that we're making our streets safer. And anyone who is a citizen of this country or is here legally has nothing to fear, has nothing to get out of bed in the morning to be scared of, because we are only enforcing the law. If you are in violation, if you have perverted one of our programs in order to be here illegally, absolutely, you may be held accountable for that action. But that individual and those businesses don't have anything to fear if they're following the law. Sure.
Anna Giaritelli, Washington Examiner. By putting in 500 miles of this buoy, fewer people are going to be able to get across, whereas the wall is built farther in a lot of places. So do you expect people in custody to come down over time, people going into new immigration court cases, and overall deportation proceedings to come down in the future?
I don't think that we're going to see any less people in detention or in immigration court, because we've still got 15 to 20 million people that are in this country illegally. And so if they don't leave on their own voluntarily and partner with us, I'll remind you all, everyone who wants to go home to their country, we will get you a ticket. We will give you $1,000 and we will help you get there. And you get the chance to come back to the United States the right way. If you wait till we detain you, then you'll never get the chance to be an American citizen. So I think that having a secure border is incredibly important, but we will probably still continue to see detainment centers and immigration courts quite full and being utilized extensively because of the devastation that Joe Biden put on this country. By allowing that many people to come into our country unvetted, we have no idea the amount of dangerous criminals that are here. I'll go to you. Yes.
Obviously, with everything that's been happening in these recent days over in Venezuela, this has created a lot of uncertainty for Venezuelans living here in the U.S. What is your message for them there, and also the process that they should follow?
Overwhelmingly, the Venezuelans that I've heard from and talked to are excited about the changes that they see in their country. It is never a bad thing to have a murderous, vicious dictator removed from power. They have more opportunities to go back to their country and have it be more successful and provide for their families today than they did a week ago when Maduro was still in charge. So today's a good day, and we'll continue to do all we can to partner with Venezuela to help it be successful. Yes.
Here into the second Trump administration, and I wanted to ask you, what has been the hardest part about being DHS secretary?
Oh, nothing's hard about this job. My favorite thing to do is to solve problems and meet challenges. So President Trump and this country are the greatest gifts that I think we have right now, because we were handed a mess. And this country, and people are desperate for some hope and some opportunity to remind themselves of what being an American is all about. So I am very blessed every day that I get the chance to get up and work with law enforcement officers, work with people who take an oath to put their life on the line for their fellow brothers, and I absolutely love it. Yes, sir.
Who recently cut ties with ICE.
You know, my understanding is that Hilton has severed their franchise relationship with the owner of the hotel that we saw disrespecting our law enforcement so much. My hope is that hotel owners and franchises across the country would recognize this as an opportunity for them to bless our law enforcement officers. When you see them in your communities, support them, support their families, maybe give them an opportunity to have a chance to stay at your hotel, and maybe make them some eggs in the morning, give them some toast and juice, and shake their hand and pray over them as they go out the door that they'll be safe while they do their work. I know that when you turn on the news every day, it sounds discouraging, but our law enforcement are the perfect example we can point to for our kids of the kind of Americans we should all want to grow up to be like. Yes.
Can you share who DHS is coordinating the Venezuela deportation flights with in the new Venezuelan regime? And
well,
also,
all travel.
Do you have any concerns with deporting Venezuelans back to Venezuela when some of them might be the same Venezuelans that are cheering the end of the Maduro regime in the streets here in the United States?
So the State Department always works on all travel documents and flight arrangements for every country when we return individuals back to their homes. We'll continue to do that and let the State Department do that. We have those in detention that may be from Venezuela that will submit their paperwork to the State Department, just like every other individual across the world, and make sure they get home as soon as possible. We'll continue to evaluate every situation in every country and always make sure that we're putting Americans first. You'd have to ask the State Department. Other questions? Yes. Oh, one more? Go for it.
Thank you, Secretary Noem. Logan Washburn with the Dallas Express. After Maduro's capture, how are you expecting the situation to change on the border here?
You know, I would say that it sends a clear message to the rest of the world that when President Trump says something, he means it, and he'll take action to defend this country. We have been busy communicating that with world leaders, where we've seen a lot of our illegal alien and criminal population come from. I'm grateful that not only do they know that we speak a lot of words and that we try to build relationships, but also if you violate our laws, if you threaten people, and if you don't follow what international law is as well, then there will be consequences. Okay. Oh, yep, last one.
In regards to the ICE raids affecting construction sites, do you have a comment on Congresswoman De La Cruz's idea to create some kind of middle path for those being affected?
You know, I think our law is our law. If there's a Congresswoman that has an idea, then absolutely, that's the proper process if she does not agree with where we stand on immigration policy today. Congress is elected to debate and to be thoughtful and to create policy and then vote on it and create statute. If she has an idea, her colleagues in Congress and the White House are more than interested in talking about it and see if it's something that America can get behind. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
That was Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem speaking live from Brownsville, Texas, touting the Trump administration's success on securing the U.S. southern border and announcing 230 miles of a new water barrier to help further secure the border along waterways funded by the One Big Beautiful bill. And the State Department has expanded its list of nations whose citizens will be subject to visa bonds of up to $15,000 to enter the United States. It has added 25 more nations. The latest additions will bring the total to 38. The newly added countries include Algeria, Cuba, Nepal, Nigeria, Venezuela, and others. B1 and B2 visas are used for short-term business and tourism travel. Citizens of those nations who are eligible are required to post a bond ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, with the amount being determined during the visa interview. The list of nations stems from a 12-month visa bond pilot program the department launched in August last year. It targeted countries with high visa overstay rates and insufficient screening and vetting, or those that offer citizenship to individuals via investment. The Trump administration announced a new slate of dietary guidelines today. It recommends Americans eat more protein and less sugar than previously advised, and that consumers avoid highly processed foods to achieve a healthy diet. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt briefed reporters earlier. She was joined by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Take a listen.
These new guidelines are informed by the best and most reliable research on health and nutrition, particularly as it relates to the role of our diets in the prevalence of chronic disease in the country. They are also These guidelines are easy to read and understand, so every American, young and old, can access this information that literally has the power to change lives. But these are not just an updated guideline. These are the foundation to all federal food programs in our country.
Eat real food. This is the main message of the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, which encourage households and schools to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods. That means more protein, more dairy, more healthy fats, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, whether they are fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. We are finally putting real food back at the center of the American diet. Real food that nourishes the body, restores health, fuels energy, and builds strength.
The guidelines are the latest step in the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda. Kennedy and Rollins had promised to simplify the guidelines. They also pledged to remove what they called undue influence from food companies. The guidelines are issued every 5 years. They are published by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture. The new version includes changes promised by Kennedy. It strongly discourages eating highly processed foods and warns against added sugar. And Kennedy has linked high sugar and processed food consumption to chronic disease in the U.S. Other recommendations remained unchanged. These include prioritizing fruits and vegetables and whole grains. They also keep the cap on saturated fat at 10% of daily calories. Warner Brothers Discovery has rejected Paramount's latest takeover bid. The media giant told shareholders to stick with a competing offer from Netflix. Warner Brothers leadership has repeatedly rebuffed Paramount's bids. The company has urged shareholders to back the sale of its streaming and studio business to Netflix for $72 billion. Warner Brothers Discovery said today that its board determined Paramount's offer is not in the best interests of the company or its shareholders. Paramount has offered $77.9 billion for the entire company and gone straight to shareholders with a hostile bid. Last month, Paramount added a guarantee from Oracle founder Larry Ellison to back $40.4 billion in equity financing for the company's offer. Larry Ellison is the father of Paramount CEO David Ellison. Paramount also increased its promised payout to shareholders to $5.8 billion if the deal is blocked by regulators. A multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme in the spotlight today on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers held the first public hearing today, with one witness testifying that government officials retaliated against people who tried to report the fraud. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the takeaways.
House lawmakers on the Oversight Committee are exposing a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme taking place in Minnesota. Around $9 billion meant to support Minnesota programs may have been stolen since 2018, a federal prosecutor reported last month. House Republicans on the committee this morning criticized Minnesota officials for not acting quickly enough to stop it.
Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Minnesota's Democrat leadership have either been asleep at the wheel or complicit in these crimes.
The child care fraud scheme was first exposed more than a decade ago, between 2011 and 2013. But one state lawmaker who appeared as a witness today said that those who tried to initially report the fraud faced government retaliation.
They revealed that retaliation now includes threats of being fired with cause, which means you do not get unemployment insurance in the state of Minnesota, being blacklisted from all state agencies.
The Democrats' witness, a former DOJ official, pushed back on the idea that fraudsters haven't faced repercussions, highlighting the consequences that some have faced so far.
The department has charged over a dozen people for stealing $14 million from a program meant for children with autism.
The state's governor, Tim Walz, has repeatedly defended his handling of the fraud crisis. But since the crisis has been exposed on the national scale, Walz has since dropped his re-election campaign for a third term. Some Republicans aim to expose that some of the stolen money was used to fund Democrat politicians, even the state's attorney general.
Did money flow to Mr. Ellison's campaign a couple weeks later from some of the folks who were in that meeting?
Sure did.
How much, do we know how much that was?
I do not have that number.
So it wasn't just overlooking the fraud. They were actively trying to make sure this program continued, and then they benefited from that politically with contributions to their campaign, all in this same year, all in 2021.
Many people involved in stealing these federal dollars are of Somali descent. Republicans are urging the Trump administration to deport and denaturalize these alleged criminals, while Democrats are urging the public not to demonize an entire group of people based on the actions of a few.
We don't need to make these partisan hearings. Every American has a stake in making sure that they have a receipt for where their tax dollars are going.
Minnesota isn't the only state under the microscope. The Trump administration has also opened an investigation into California and halted $10 billion in funding for social service programs in 5 Democratic states.
I think it is very widespread. We're just scraping the surface right now.
Today's hearing was the first of multiple fraud-related hearings. Chairman Comer has called on Governor Walz to testify in February. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Georgia is set to hold a special election on March 10th to replace former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Greene resigned on Monday. In letters to Governor Brian Kemp and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, she wrote, quote, "It has been my honor and privilege to serve the people of Georgia's 14th Congressional District." Now voters will choose who gets to finish her term. Greene's district northwest of Atlanta is considered a Republican stronghold. Texas agriculture officials are again warning residents about unsolicited seed packages being mailed from China. The Texas Department of Agriculture says more than 1,100 mystery seed packages have been collected since February last year, sent to over 100 locations statewide. The most recent package was recovered on December 29th. Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller says the seeds pose a potential threat to crops, ecosystems, and the food supply. Officials say similar mailings have been reported in several other states, making it a nationwide concern. Investigators say the seeds are sacred lotus, an invasive aquatic plant when introduced outside its native range. Texans who receive suspicious packages are urged not to open, plant, or throw them away, and to contact the Texas Department of Agriculture for proper handling instructions. The Department of Justice says it is suing Arizona and Connecticut for failing to provide full voter registration rolls for federal inspection. The lawsuits were filed yesterday. They bring the department's total to 23 states and the District of Columbia that are facing similar legal action. The DOJ says the requests are part of its efforts to ensure voter list accuracy and election integrity. Attorney General Pam Bondi says accurate voter rolls are essential for free and fair elections, and added that states refusing transparency expect legal action. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said the department will hold states accountable when they fail to comply with federal election laws. Arizona and Connecticut officials say they declined to release the data over voter privacy concerns. Federal officials say the suspect in the killings of 2 Brown University students and an MIT professor left behind video confessions before dying by suicide. The Justice Department says the videos were recovered from an electronic device found where the suspect's body was discovered last month. The DOJ says Claudio Valente, a Portuguese national and former Brown student, showed no remorse for the shootings carried out last month. According to transcripts, Valente said he planned the attack for years and did not regret his actions, saying, "I'm not going to apologize because during my lifetime, no one sincerely apologized to me." The Justice Department says investigators have not yet determined a motive for the attacks. The Justice Department has released a grand jury indictment against the suspect accused of planting pipe bombs near party headquarters ahead of January 6, 2021. Brian Cole Jr. was taken into custody last month, ending a nearly 5-year manhunt. Prosecutors say Cole planted explosive devices outside both the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters on January 5th, 2021. Neither bomb detonated, but investigators say both devices were capable of exploding just blocks from the U.S. Capitol. The indictment charges Cole with transporting explosives across state lines and attempting to destroy property using explosives. If convicted on both counts, Cole could face decades in federal prison. One of the most notorious spies in U.S. history has died at the age of 84. The U.S. Bureau of Prisons says Aldrich Ames died in custody on Monday. A Maryland medical examiner will determine the cause of death. The former CIA case officer was arrested by the FBI in 1994 and sentenced to life in prison for espionage against the U.S. He was responsible for the arrest and eventual execution of numerous Soviet and Russian officials secretly working on behalf of the U.S. intelligence community as double agents. Ames joined the CIA in 1962 as a low-level document analyst. He rose through the ranks up to case officer and specialized in targeting the Soviet Union. According to his guilty plea agreement, Ames went to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1985 and volunteered to spy against the U.S. It's estimated Ames received about $2.5 million from Russia and the Soviet Union for his years of spying. Minneapolis officials are now holding a press conference on a shooting involving ICE agents. Let's tune in.
As soon as it happened and we learned of the incident, we had several priorities. The first, of course, was to get the victim to the hospital and to get care as soon as possible. To the family, I'm so deeply sorry. There's nothing that I can say right now that's going to make you or your relatives or the friends of the victim feel any better. There were, I believe, 2 Minneapolis police officers that responded and were in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The second was to get ICE off of the scene. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of ICE and federal officers that were there at the time. Having them there was only causing more chaos. Having them there was only making a difficult situation even more problematic, and one that, yes, they created themselves.
The United States launched an operation today to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic. The Justice Department announced the seizure of the Bella 1 for violations of U.S. sanctions. The move follows a weeks-long pursuit starting near Venezuela last month. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth confirmed the news on X, writing, quote, "The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world." The vessel was previously known as the Bella 1 and has been renamed the Marinera. It's on the U.S. sanctions list for evading oil restrictions tied to Venezuela. The Department of Homeland Security led the operation with military support. U.S. law enforcement officials are now aboard the ship. There were no reports of shots fired during the boarding. The seizure comes after the tanker was tracked near Scotland, drawing criticism from Moscow, which says the vessel was operating in international waters under Russian law. The US has also seized 2 other sanctioned tankers near Venezuela in recent weeks as part of its blockade of illicit oil shipments. In a separate operation, the U.S. Southern Command says it captured a second Venezuela-linked tanker in the Caribbean Sea. In a social media post, Southern Command said the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless, sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The vessel is known as the Sophia. Southern Command says it was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting the ship to the U.S. And more developments from Venezuela. President Trump announced yesterday the U.S. will soon receive 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil in the near future. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus a look at how Chinese defense systems in Venezuela failed to impress.
President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the oil the U.S. receives from Venezuela will be sold at market price and that money will be controlled by him as President of the United States. Trump says he will ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The transfer could be worth nearly $3 billion, with oil trading at roughly $56 a barrel. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum discusses utilizing oil from Venezuela, speaking on Fox News.
You need to dilute that heavy crude with a lighter product. And of course, we have an excess of that lighter product here because the shale oils that come out of the shale revolution in America are perfect for blending. It's great news for jobs. It's great news for gas prices going forward. It's great news for America, and it's great news for Venezuela.
Burgum says Venezuela has an opportunity now to have capital come in and rebuild their economy.
They have larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world. Venezuela, one of the poorest countries in the world.
Ambassador to the UN, Michael Waltz, pushed back on UN criticism of the Maduro operation, speaking on Fox News.
I don't know why they're so upset. As I pointed out at the Security Council, over 50 countries didn't even recognize Maduro because he stole the election. So it's hard to figure out what they're so upset about. Well, I think we know the answer. It's because it's President Trump, and he's a man of action and took real action.
Waltz says the Venezuelan people are going to be better off.
And look, at the end of the day, this was the right thing to do. President Trump took bold action and will continue to swing and doge that ridiculous organization called the United Nations.
The lightning operation to capture Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, punched in and out of Caracas before its air defenses could mount an effective response. The raid raised uncomfortable questions for China about the limits of the Chinese-supplied systems that Venezuela has leaned on, especially anti-stealth radar that China advertised as capable of spotting and stopping U.S. stealth aircraft. Analyst Yu Tsung-chi, a retired major general from Taiwan, says the operation suggested deeper weaknesses, corruption in China's defense industry, and a lack of reliability of the technology and command structure meant to tie those systems together. Yu described it as a system built to look modern on paper and intimidating in propaganda, but falls apart under the demands of real combat. Yu says neither Chinese or Russian air defense systems made the slightest bit of difference once the U.S. brought real-time intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision weapons to bear. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Ukraine is seeking a clear answer from its partners on what their response would be in the case of a future Russian attack. This just one day after more than 30 countries, including the US, met in Paris to finalize security guarantees for Ukraine.
If there is aggression again, will all partners give a strong response to the Russians? I'm asking this very question to all our partners, and I haven't received a clear, unambiguous answer yet.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he sees that partners are willing to provide strong security guarantees, but he added that the guarantees have to be legally binding, supported by the nation's parliaments and the US Congress. He also said the American side has been productive in achieving real results, but according to Zelensky, more is needed. He told reporters he hoped to meet President Trump soon, possibly in Washington, to discuss US security guarantees. The US, for the first time, backed a coalition of Ukraine's allies in vowing to provide security guarantees. The agreement followed a coalition of the willing summit in Paris yesterday. Here's more.
The United States, for the first time on Tuesday, backed a broad coalition of Ukraine's allies in vowing to provide security guarantees that leaders said would include binding commitments to support the country if it is attacked by Russia again. The pledge came at a summit in Paris of the so-called Coalition of the Willing to firm up security guarantees to reassure Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said after the summit that President Donald Trump, quote, strongly stands behind security protocols.
Those security protocols are meant to, A, deter any attacks, any further attacks in Ukraine, and B, if there are any attacks, they're meant to defend, and they will do both.
A statement by coalition leaders also said that allies will participate in a proposed U.S.-led ceasefire monitoring and verification mechanism. Talks to bring the almost 4-year conflict to an end have accelerated since November. Until recently, much of the focus was on pledges of military aid for Ukraine's forces and possible contributions to an international reassurance force. But attention has now shifted to legally binding guarantees to come to Kyiv's aid in the event of another attack by Moscow. Kyiv has long said it cannot be safe without guarantees that are comparable to NATO's mutual defense agreement to deter Russia from attacking again. Moscow wants any peace deal to bar Ukraine from military alliances.
Homeland Security has just put up a statement regarding the ICE incident in Minneapolis. The statement says the ICE officers were in Minneapolis conducting targeted operations when rioters began blocking ICE officers, and one of those violent rioters weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. DHS calls it an act of domestic terrorism. The statement continued to say an ICE officer, fearing for his life, the lives of his fellow law enforcement, and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. The alleged perpetrator was hit and is deceased. The ICE officers who were hurt are expected to make full recoveries. DHS says this is the direct consequence of constant attacks and demonization of officers by sanctuary politicians who fuel and encourage rampant assaults on our law enforcement, who are facing 1,300% increase in assaults against them and an 8,000% increase in death threats. The department also says it will give the public more information as soon as it becomes available. The State Department has expanded its list of nations whose citizens will be subject to visa bonds of up to $15,000 to enter the United States. It has added 25 more nations. The latest additions will bring the total to 38. The newly added countries include Algeria, Cuba, Nepal, Nigeria, Venezuela, and others. B1 and B2 visas are used for short-term business and tourism travel. Citizens of those nations who are eligible are required to post a bond ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, with the amount being determined during the visa interview. The list of nations stems from a 12-month visa bond pilot program the department launched in August last year. It targeted countries with high visa overstay rates, insufficient screening and vetting, or those that offer citizenship to individuals via investment. Georgia is set to hold a special election on March 10th to replace former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Greene resigned on Monday. In letters to Governor Brian Kemp and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, she wrote, quote, "It has been my honour and privilege to serve the people of Georgia's 14th congressional district." Now voters will choose who gets to finish her term. Greene's district, northwest of Atlanta, is considered a Republican stronghold. Texas agriculture officials are again warning residents about unsolicited seed packages from being mailed from China. The Texas Department of Agriculture says more than 1,100 mystery seed packages have been collected since February last year, sent to over 100 locations statewide. The most recent package was recovered on December 29th. Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller says the seeds pose a potential threat to crops, ecosystems and the food supply. Officials say similar mailings have been reported in several other states, making it a nationwide concern. Investigators say the seeds are sacred lotus, an invasive aquatic plant when introduced outside its native range. Texans who receive suspicious packages are urged not to open, plant or throw them away, and to contact the Texas Department of Agriculture for proper handling instructions. The Department of Justice says it is suing Arizona and Connecticut for failing to provide full voter registration rolls for federal inspection. The lawsuits were filed yesterday. They bring the department's total to 23 states and the District of Columbia that are facing similar legal action. The DOJ says the requests are part of its efforts to ensure voter list accuracy and election integrity. Attorney General Pam Bondi said accurate voter rolls are essential for free and fair elections, and added that states refusing transparency can expect legal action. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said the department will hold states accountable when they fail to comply with federal election laws. Arizona and Connecticut officials say they declined to release the data over voter privacy concerns. The Justice Department has released a grand jury indictment against the suspect accused of planting pipe bombs near party headquarters ahead of January 6, 2021. Brian Cole Jr. was taken into custody last month, ending a nearly 5-year manhunt. Prosecutors say Cole planted explosive devices outside both the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters on January 5, 2021. Neither bomb detonated, but investigators say both devices were capable of exploding just blocks from the U.S. Capitol. The indictment charges Cole with transporting explosives across state lines and attempting to destroy property using explosives. If convicted on both counts, Cole could face decades in federal prison. One of the most notorious spies in U.S. history has died at the age of 84. The U.S. Bureau of Prisons says Aldridge Ames died in custody on Monday. A Maryland medical examiner will determine the cause of death. The former CIA case officer was arrested by the FBI in 1994 and sentenced to life in prison for espionage against the U.S. He was responsible for the arrest and eventual execution of numerous Soviet and Russian officials secretly working on behalf of the U.S. intelligence community as double agents. Ames joined the CIA in 1962 as a low-level document analyst. He rose through the ranks up to case officer and specialized in targeting the Soviet Union. According to his guilty plea agreement, Ames went to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1985 and volunteered to spy against the U.S. It's estimated Ames received about $2.5 million from Russia and the Soviet Union for his years of spying. Warner Brothers Discovery has rejected Paramount's latest takeover bid. The media giant told shareholders to stick with a competing offer from Netflix. Warner Brothers leadership has repeatedly rebuffed Paramount's bids. The company has urged shareholders to back the sale of its streaming and studio business to Netflix for $72 billion. Warner Brothers Discovery said today that its board determined Paramount's offer is not in the best interests of the company or its shareholders. Paramount has offered $77.9 billion for the entire company and gone straight to shareholders with a hostile bid. Last month, Paramount added a guarantee from Oracle founder Larry Ellison to back $40.4 billion in equity financing for the company's offer. Larry Ellison is the father of Paramount CEO David Ellison. Paramount also increased its promised payout to shareholders to $5.8 billion if the deal is blocked by regulators. The Trump administration announced a new slate of dietary guidelines today. It recommends Americans eat more protein and less sugar than previously advised, and that consumers avoid highly processed foods to achieve a healthy diet. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt briefed reporters earlier. She was joined by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Take a listen.
These new guidelines are informed by the best and most reliable research on health and nutrition, particularly as it relates to the role of our diets in the prevalence of chronic disease in the country. They are also These guidelines are easy to read and understand, so every American, young and old, can access this information that literally has the power to change lives. But these are not just an updated guideline. These are the foundation to all federal food programs in our country.
Eat real food. This is the main message of the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, which encourage households and schools to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods. That means more protein, more dairy, more healthy fats, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, whether they are fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. We are finally putting real food back at the center of the American diet. Real food that nourishes the body, restores health, fuels energy, and builds strength.
The guidelines are the latest step in the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda. Kennedy and Rollins had promised to simplify the guidelines. They also pledged to remove what they called undue influence from food companies. The guidelines are issued every 5 years. They're published by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture. The new version includes changes promised by Kennedy. It strongly discourages eating highly processed foods and warns against added sugar. Kennedy has linked high sugar and processed food consumption to chronic disease in the US. Other recommendations remain unchanged. These include prioritizing fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. They also keep the cap on saturated fat at 10% of daily calories. And we'll cover more news right after this break.